Okay. Everyone else ready? Good evening and welcome to our March 9th, 2023 Planning and Zoning meeting. If everyone could please have a seat, we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order and get started. We do have quite an agenda tonight with 7 different items on it. So as a commission, we will definitely try and work as efficiently as possible through all of these while giving each application the time that it deserves. So first thing is to approve the minutes of February 9th. Roll call. Oh, roll call.
Commissioner Childs.
Present.
Wayne.
Present.
Caldwell.
Present.
Roberts.
Here.
Freeman.
Here.
All commissioners are in attendance and we have a quorum.
Now that a quorum has been found, we will go ahead and now move to approving the minutes of the February 9th and the February 21st meetings. Are there any changes or comments?
No.
I would motion to approve the minutes for February 9th and February 21st of 2023.
Second the motion.
There's been a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All of those opposed? Minutes pass. We'll move to old business. First on the list is CUP 21-09 Copper Rocks subdivision. This is a final plat. To note, this is not a public hearing. Has there been any ex parte contact or does anyone have a conflict of interest at this time?
No.
Okay. Hearing that, we will move on to the staff report.
Okay, the staff report for CUP 2109 Copper Rock Subdivision Final Plat. The applicant is James Polson with Biltmore Investment Group. The property is in Section 16, Township 16 North, Range 3 east of the Boise Meridian, Valley County, Idaho, and is 4.15 acres. The final plat, however, includes 6.4 acres. Biltmore Investments is requesting final plat approval. The commission will review the final plat to determine conformance with the preliminary plat, approved densities, and conditional use permit. The original proposed subdivision name was Osprey Point Subdivision. The site is adjacent on the south side of Donley City Park and Boat Ramp. The approval for the CUP and preliminary plat were effective April 20th, 2021. The preliminary plat approval was for a 14-lot single-family residential subdivision on the 4.15 acres. The final plat submittal consists of 13 single-family residential lots and 2 common lots. The common lots are for North Lake Recreational Sewer and Water District lift station and the fire protection water tank, utilities, and access easements. The increase in acreage is due to the 2 common lots and platting of a 70-foot wide road dedication for Don Drive. Don Drive is currently a 50-foot prescriptive easement. Lots would be accessed from 6 shared driveways onto Don Drive. Condition of approval number 7 requires a letter of approval from Donley Rural Fire District. This will require Idaho Power to provide power lines for the water tank and lift station and implementation of the Wildland Urban Interface Fire Protection Plan. A submittal letter from the applicant includes letters from Idaho Department of Water Resources and Idaho Department of Environmental Quality. The final plat was submitted on January 26th of 2023. Legal notice was posted in the Star News on February 16th and February 23rd. The proposed final plat was posted on the Valley County website on February 6th. The final plat submittal was forwarded to the City of Donley pursuant to Valley County Code Section 10-3-3-3 on February 7th, and this is not a public hearing. Agency comments received. Jess Ellis, Donley Fire Marshal, states the Donley Fire District requirements for final plat have not been met. Fire protection water storage tank specifications need submitted. The connecting water line, automatic fill and float devices have not been inspected or tested. Kathy Riffey, Valley County Cadastral Specialist, found no discrepancies with the plat. A vesting deed to the North Lake Recreational Sewer and Water District for Block 2, Lot 2 is anticipated after the subdivision plat has been recorded. Paul Ashton, Parametric and Valley County Engineer, recommends approval of the Stormwater Pollution Prevention Plan. Additional questions, comments, or recommendations? There need to be additional notes on the plat as follows. Wildland Urban Interface Fire Protection Plan should be recorded in the instrument number noted on the plat. CC&Rs are recorded. Shared driveway maintenance agreement will be recorded as instrument number. Declaration of utilities is required. Lots are limited to one wood burning device, and then the Valley County Board of Commissioners have the sole discretion to set the level of service for any public road. The level of service can be changed. And those are just additional notes that need to be placed on here. Must submit a shared driveway maintenance agreement. Shared driveways are not shown on Block 1, Lot 2, and 12. And there actually is, it's the C10 covers up the hash mark here. And then I believe the same thing is going on here. But I'll let the applicant respond to that. A 6-foot wide public pedestrian easement is referenced on the plat. And that is supposed to be right here. This note here says C notes 2 and 10. And I've talked to the applicant and they're gonna make that more prevalent so it's easier to read. Don Drive needs to be shown as a public right-of-way on the plat. Just a note. It says it's dedicated, but it needs to be noted here that it's a public road. CC&R shall reference shared driveways, fire water tank maintenance, the Wildland Urban Interface Fire Protection Plan, lighting, and limit each lot to one wood burning device. This plat is to be recorded by April 21st of 2023. Due to the weather constraints, it is unlikely that condition of approval number 7 will be finalized by then. So I recommend that the commissioners extend the final plat approval for 6 months to allow time for Idaho Power lines to be properly completed and approved, and approval obtained from the Donley Fire Department, because they've been waiting on Idaho Power to get that power to the lift station. The following are the conditions of approval and comments as to whether the applicant has complied with each condition. The western property line is shown as a section line, not the lot line. Here. This one. And I'll let him address that. And I question whether the surveyor's narrative should be removed on final plats. Conditions of approval, the ones I did make comments on are the number 3, which says it has to be recorded by April 20th. And I'm asking for that 6 months additional time for them to do that so they can get all of the power and everything in. 7, we need the final approval letter from Donley Fire as soon as the power is put in so they can test the tank. 8, applicant should state where this information is included in the CC&Rs. That is concerning the lighting, wildfire prevention, and limit of one wood burning device. A floodplain note is needed on the plat. And I would like to know if the fiber optics were put along the road. If they installed power out here. And then stormwater management and pollution plan should be submitted for lots 1 through 5 with the final plat showing review and approval by the Valley County engineer. What we've asked them to do is create that stormwater management plan and then we'll record it on here so that people know where to look to find that, because the reservoir is out here and the previous P&Z commission wanted a stormwater management plan that they'll implement at time of construction. And that ends my staff report unless you have questions.
I have a question for staff. How did you come up with the 6 months extension? I was just curious.
I thought it was an appropriate amount of time. It gives them enough time to get it done without having to come back for additional approval. You know, who knows when the snow's going to melt?
Just keeps coming.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions for staff? Now we'll hear from the applicant.
If he wants to address those.
If you would like to
Sorry.
address these.
Yeah.
Oh,
Good
and please state your name and address for the record.
Okay, good evening, Commissioners. My name is Kevin Amar. Address is 1580 West Cayuse Creek Drive in Meridian, Idaho. I appreciate your time tonight. We have worked with Cinda on these conditions of approval, and we are in general agreement with them. We'll continue through this process. The improvements on the project are generally done. We just ran out of time to get some power to the equipment for the fire water tank, but all the improvements are in the ground. So we're sure we can get this done in the next 6 months. And then as far as the other requirements, we'll make sure that those are completed as well. There was a question with respect to the section line and surveyor narrative, and we'll work through with Cinda on that. The fiber optic along the west side of Don Drive, that has been installed and is installed. I can show you a picture of
Nice.
a placard. And then we'll get the SWIP along with the other items that need to be done. So unless you have questions, we'll comply with the staff report and move on.
One quick question. So is your power requirement something you still need to schedule with Idaho Power, or is it just on-site contractor work?
So it's scheduled. It just snowed earlier than we thought it should snow.
Okay. So
Couldn't
you're in
control that.
line with Idaho
Yes.
Power?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Are there any other questions for the applicant?
Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you. Any thoughts, comments?
Madam Chairman, I would move that the conditional use permit 21-09 Copper Rock subdivision final plat with the change of extending the electrical work to October 20th, 2023, as suggested by staff. Be approved, authorize the chairman to sign the plat.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
No.
Clarification, we will sign the plat before we get all the conditions or after?
So there are conditions of approval. There's a process to.
Right,
send it
as soon as we get the Mylars in, that means everything's done and it's ready to be taken to the county commissioners. And then I call the chairman and the chairman will come sign the plat.
But if all the conditions haven't been met and we're going for a 6-month extension, why don't we wait to do that at that time?
Well, everything basically is done. There's always fine tuning to do.
But we don't have the letter from the fire department. That isn't done.
Well, it'll be done, we'll have the letter before it's recorded.
Well, you have a letter, but there's conditions within that.
Right, he has
He
to
needs
go
to
out and test the
satisfy.
tank.
Right. There's, Madam Chairman, maybe just for
Absolutely.
little clarification. This still has to go to the county commissioners to be signed off. It's a recommendation that they sign off on it. So there's still another step. That they have to have all of these things done, including the Mylars, before it's final.
And staff will make sure that they're all completed before the chairman signs.
The ordinance says for final plats, the Planning and Zoning Commission makes sure it's substantially compliant with the preliminary plat. And so they get to a point where we just need to fine tune some stuff. County commissioners have even approved a couple plats with, fire hydrants needing to be tested. We just don't issue a building permit. Each plat is different, and we just work through it. I mean, before we record that plat on this one, we'll have that letter from Donley Fire.
I guess I'm kind of going in a circle. If we're doing that, why did you ask for the 6 months?
Because he's waiting on Idaho Power to connect the power so that Donley can go out and test the pump.
Okay.
If there's nothing else? Okay. All of those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. There is a 10-day appeal period in which anyone can appeal the decision of the commission to the Board of County Commissioners in accordance with Title 9-5H-12 of the Valley County Code.
See you later.
Okay. Now we will move on to CUP 22-04, the preserve at McCall Ranch, final plat. Again, this is not a public hearing. Has there been any ex parte contact or conflict of interest with anyone?
No.
No.
Okay, this time we'll go ahead and hear the staff report.
Well, I'm trying to get up there. This is the location here at the corner of Johnson and Norwood. It's in this corner. Here's the plat. Okay, the final plat staff report for CUP 2204, the preserve at McCall Ranch. The applicant is River Investments LLC. The property is addressed at 86 Johnson Lane in the southeast of Section 29, Township 18 North, Range 3 east of the Boise Meridian, Valley County, Idaho. River Investments LLC is requesting final plat approval. The commission will review the final plat to determine conformance with the preliminary plat, approved densities, and conditional use permit. The original proposed subdivision was named Curved Horn Ranch Subdivision. The site is at the northwest intersection of Johnson Lane and Norwood Road. This plat consists of 8 single-family residential lots. Wetlands and shared driveways are shown on the plat. The approval for a conditional use permit preliminary plat was effective March 22nd of 2022. The preliminary plat approval was for an 8-lot single-family residential subdivision on approximately 20 acres. 2 lots would access directly onto Johnson Lane and Norwood Road, which are both public roads. 6 lots would access from a new private road onto Norwood Road. That's here. 2 shared access driveways are proposed from the private road. The commission did not require an navigation easement for CUP 2204 and specifically removed related conditions of approval that were recommended in the staff report for March 10th of 2022. Valley County does not require Federal Aviation Administration Form 7460-1 with all building permits. Financial guarantees proposed for the remaining construction of the private road and fire protection water tank. Electrical and communication utilities have been paid in full. Construction is expected to be complete in the spring, summer of 2023. Per the approved fire protection plan, the private road will be constructed, water storage tank installed, and disturbed areas will be revegetated. Final plat was submitted on February 7th, 2023. Legal notice was posted in the Star News on February 16th and February 23rd. The proposed final plat was posted on the Valley County website on February 7th. The final plat submittal was forwarded to the City of McCall pursuant to Valley County Code Section 10-3-3-3 on February 7th, and this is not a public hearing. Agency comments received. Paul Ashton, Parametrics and Valley County Engineer, stated requirements. P&Z Commission approval is required for the Y fire apparatus turnaround as it's not consistent with a standard hammerhead turnaround in the Valley County standard drawing. A standard cul-de-sac does not appear to be feasible due to the existing terrain. The letter dated March 3rd, 2022, but not received until after was dated March 3rd, 2022, but was not received until after the P&Z Commission public hearing on March 10th. Paul Ashton, Parametrics and Valley County Engineer, stated that applicant had addressed comments in the plans and drainage report meet the standards and requirements, thus approval of the documents is recommended. Shirley Florence, Lake Irrigation District, states the applicant, as requested, has provided a document stating how they wish the allocated water to be split between the new lots in the subdivision. The board has no other issues at this point. Garrett DeYoung, McCall Fire Chief, recommends approval of the final plat and recommends that building permits not be issued until the underground water tank is installed, inspected, and inoperable. Emily Hart, McCall Airport Manager, responded regarding navigation easements in the FAA Form 7460-1. Kathy Riffey, Valley County Cadastral Technician, stated there are Scrivener's errors that should be resolved prior to recording of the plat. Staff questions, comments, or recommendations? Is there a letter from the Army Corps of Engineer regarding the wetland delineation? Add no build area to the wetland designations on the plat. Those are the dotted areas here. A motion to approve the final plat should also include approval of the Y turnaround at the culmination of the private road. Must submit a shared driveway maintenance agreement. Must add the note, only one wood burning device allowed on each lot. Correct spelling on disturbance on note 4 and spelling of discretion on note 10. The following are the conditions of approval and comments as to whether the applicant has complied with each condition. It must be recorded by March 22nd of 2024. Valley County engineer approved. They need to change Cattail Creek Place to, no, it looks like it was done. Let's see, Mestbury conduit for fiber optics, that will be completed this summer. Declaration of installation of utilities has to be placed on the front of the plat. We'll need a letter upon completion of the tank so we can issue the building permits if the board chooses to go ahead with the financial guarantees and let them record the plat. Lake Fork Irrigation District approval, that's that letter dated May 4th. Condition of approval number 11, if requested by neighbors, must transport irrigation water through site into perpetuity per Idaho code. That's plat note 13. The ditch easement is plat note 6. Wetlands have been completed. The CCNRs 2.3 and plat note 11 address lighting. A note should be placed on the plat that says lot shall not be split without a subdivision plat. The wording's different on the plat, and that should be corrected. CCNRs are addressed in those sections referenced. We do have a road development agreement drafted in conjunction with the road director and Board of County Commissioners. And I believe they've agreed to that. And since this staff report was completed, Exhibit 1 is the letter from the Army Corps of Engineers concerning the wetlands. And that's the end of my staff report unless you have questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
So, Madam Chairman, send out verify for me the parametrics letter about the turnaround.
Okay.
They do want a hammerhead style or they do not?
It wasn't, we didn't, in the CCNRs, it calls out for a cul-de-sac. They said the terrain isn't applicable here. The fire department was fine with this turnaround here, which isn't necessarily a true hammerhead. So, what did we say there? So it's a different type of turnaround. It's a wide turnaround versus a hammerhead, which this would be perpendicular instead of the Y configuration.
Functionality, it works the same way as a hammerhead.
Right, but they just wanted the P&Z to be aware of it and include that in the motion.
Right.
Make sure we're covered on that.
Any other questions?
Maybe one more.
Mhm.
So the agreement to convey irrigation water through there, that's in the future, right? So there's not a reserved easement for that?
Well, the note is on the plat. What note was that?
It's,
Must have approval letter from Lake Fork Irrigation District.
It's, note 11.
No, if requested by neighbors. That was just right here, per Valley County Code. So that says note 11. Oh, no, it's note 13. The preserve at McCall Ranch subdivision is subject to a declaration of water delivery easement on file at the office of the Recorder of Valley County, instrument number 429034
Okay, so it does
for
specify.
Idaho Code. Yeah, so it does specify that. And we do have the letter from Lake Irrigation District.
Yeah, that's fine. I was looking for the easement.
Okay.
That's there. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions, we'll hear from the applicant to address some of these. Please state your name and address for the record.
Rob Pear, Crestline Engineers, 323 Dinehard Lane, McCall. Going back through a couple of the staff questions and comments. I believe in note 11, it does say the one wood burning device is there. Then I also a little bit more information on the Y turnaround. It is it's an approved fire apparatus turnaround in an international fire code. It's not in Valley County Code. So we worked with McCall Fire and EMS to approve that through them, and ultimately we'll have a letter from McCall Fire stating that it's approved and built per that standard. Believe. Is there any other substantial questions on the plat?
Okay. I don't think there's any other questions. Thank you.
Awesome.
Any thoughts or comments from the commission?
No, Madam Chairman, I would move approval of conditional use permit 22-04, the reserve at McCall Ranch final plat. Authorize the chairman to sign and also note the acceptance of the Y turnaround as addressed by Parametrics Engineering and also accepted by the McCall Rural Fire Department.
I'll second.
Okay, there's motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All of those opposed? Motion carries. There is a 10-day appeal period in which anyone can appeal the decision of the commission to the Board of Valley County Commissioners in accordance with Title 9-5H-12 of the Valley County Code. Okay, let's move on to new business. Our first new business action item is the vacation 23-01 vacation of utility and drainage easement. At this time, I will go ahead and open the public hearing. Has there been any ex parte contact, or does anyone have any conflict of interest?
No.
Okay, great. And we'll hear from staff and have the staff report.
Okay, here's the location out here on Alta Vista. Here. And they've done a lot line adjustment here. It just hasn't been processed by the assessor yet. And so they want to vacate this utility drainage easement line here so they can build anywhere in these areas. Is basically the gist of this application. Vacation 23-01, vacation of utility and drainage easement. The applicant and owners are Alex Martin and Joseph K. Brinkley. The adjacent owner is Verna Vanis. The properties are located at 253 and 265 Alta Vista Drive. a portion of the lot line between Alta Vista subdivision lot 27 and 28 in the southwest quarter of section 36, township 18 north, range 3 east of the Boise Meridian, Valley County, Idaho. Alta Vista subdivision was recorded on September 13th of 1976. Per the plat, there's a 10-foot utility and drainage easement centered on all interior lot lines. The applicant's requesting a vacation of the 10-foot wide utility and drainage easement centered on a portion of the lot line between lots 27 and 28, Alta Vista subdivision. Both original lots 27 and 28 have been split. A lot line adjustment has also occurred on part of the original lot line between lots 27 and 28. A lot line adjustment does not move the easements. The applicants are requesting a vacation of the utility and drainage easements in order to build over the old lot line easement area in the original plat. The site is accessed from Alta Vista Drive, a public road. The application was submitted on January 30th of 2023. Legal notice was posted in the Star News on February 16th and February 23rd. Potentially affected agencies were notified on February 6th. Property owners within 300 feet of the property line were notified by fax sheet sent certified mail on February 7th. The notice and application were posted on the Valley County website on February 6th, and the site was posted February 24th. Agency comments received. Garrett DeYoung, McCall Fire Department has no comments. There were no public comments. Listed the portions of the Valley County Code that deal with vacations of plats, public rights of way, and easement for your review. Staff questions and comments. The Planning and Zoning Commission needs to determine if the future development of the neighborhood would be inhibited by the vacation. The commission decision would be a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. A condition of approval would be that Idaho Power releases the easement. The lots are within the McCall Fire District, and the lot line adjustment has not been completed according to what is on the assessor's records. The lots are not within a sewer district, irrigation district, nor a HURD district. And that ends my staff report. Oh, no, hold on. I have an Exhibit 1. Everybody has a copy. Exhibit 1 said that the lot line adjustment has occurred. It just hasn't showed up on the county GIS maps. And then Exhibit 2 is from Idaho Power. And they do not have facilities located within the requested area. And they agree to relinquish the interest between those portions of lot 27 and 28. And that ends my staff report.
Are there any questions for staff?
Cindy, are there other utilities besides Idaho Power that would have used that utility easement?
Well, it could be the phone company. And we send them notice and we absolutely never hear back from them.
Everybody has a cell phone.
That's right. We don't even really require those lines to be put in anywhere yet.
Okay, thank you.
This time we will hear a presentation by the applicant. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name's Alexis Martin. I'm at 265 Alta Vista Drive, and I'm the applicant along with my husband, Joe Brinkley, living at the same location. And I guess I don't really have anything else to add. I think Cinda covered it very well. I guess I could just reiterate that we've done the lot line adjustment, and now the utility easement runs directly through the middle of both properties. So we want to vacate that so we could potentially build structures on there. And she also addressed that we had the notice from Idaho Power relinquishing their interest in it. And so if you have any questions for me.
Any questions?
No.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
What did we do? Thank you. Now we will hear testimony of proponents. Any testimony of uncommitted? Any testimony of opponents? Yep, I don't think there will be a rebuttal by the applicant then. So now we will close the public hearing for deliberations. Thoughts and comments?
No comment?
Madam Chair, I would motion that we approve VAC 23-01, vacation of utility and drainage easement.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second on the floor. Any further discussion?
We get some deliberation on why you're making this recommendation.
What, I think that where it was utility easement and Idaho Power is pretty much the utility that would go in there, and they said they don't need it. So in my mind, it's pretty clear, pretty easy.
Any other comments?
I agree.
Okay, all of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Is there a 10-day appeal period?
No, it'll automatically go to the Board of County Commissioners.
Not on. Okay, thank you. Now we'll move on to V-1, unless anyone needs a break, or are we good? Okay. Move on to V-1-23, Franklin Building Supply Setback Variance. At this time, we will go ahead and open the public hearing. Has there been any ex parte contact, or does anyone have a conflict of interest?
No.
No.
Go ahead and hear the staff report then.
Okay, this is the property owned here by Franklin. Here's the original, the newest site plan approved. So, staff report for V-1-23, Franklin Building Supply Setback Variance. The applicant's Franklin Building and DYL Limited Partnership. The property's addressed at 23 Johnson Lane and 14047 Highway 55 in the northeast of Section 33, Township 18 North, Range 3 east of the Boise Meridian, Valley County, Idaho. Franklin Building Supply Company is requesting a variance to relax the setback from the required 100 feet to 0 feet from the property line along Highway 55 and the southwest portion of the site. The applicant believes that its historic and current use of the temporary storage of materials within the setback area adjacent to Highway 55 and in the southwest area of the site are specifically allowed and permitted under CUP 99-1. The applicant's representative states that if the variance is granted, Franklin Building Supply will limit all material height within the setback area to no greater than 15 feet. The site is accessed from Johnson Lane, a public road, and State Highway 55. The business was established in 1983. This site and business have had multiple conditional use permit approvals. CUP 83-7 was expansion of an existing area business with an addition of 60 feet by 106-foot storage warehouse. CUP 84-2 was an expansion addition of a 26-foot by 38-foot storage warehouse. CUP 90-4 expansion was for a 27-foot by 120-foot addition to the warehouse. Number 1, a 20-foot by 108 extension to the side of warehouse number 2, relocation of an underground diesel tank, level and grade approximately 3 acres to the west of the warehouse number 1, and construct a fence at the perimeter, and then pave yard area in front of the warehouse number 1 and between warehouse number 1 and number 2. CUP 93-2 was an expansion. That should probably say 1,788 square foot addition on the existing store to expand the retail and office area. CUP 93-30 was an expansion for a 2-story retail store and warehouse, relocation of a small retail building. 93-30 extension was a time extension approved to 1995. And then CUP 99-1 was a master plan to expand the warehouse space, enclose part of the existing warehouse, and use it to pre-hang doors, build a truss shop, and assemble and construct docks, storage sheds, etc. In 2006, a new 76-foot by 120-foot enclosed warehouse was allowed. Land use categories from Valley County are listed here for your review. CUP included with the commercial use area business, the designation of industrial uses, since they were going to start doing some light manufacturing on site. The most recent conditional use permit was issued April 20th of 1999. The effective site plan was submitted on November 13th of 2003. The site plan does not show storage in the 100-foot setback from the property line along Highway 55. The storage and staging area is shown on the site plan west of the southernmost building. References in the file state that the structure to store product to mitigate visual impacts. Earlier in 2022, Jody Green, the Valley County Code Compliance, contacted the store manager asking the product not be stored in the 100-foot setback from the property line along Highway 55, which is also the Payette River National Scenic Byway. The product was removed from the setback area, but the applicant states it is affecting their business operation, so they've applied for the variance. The application was submitted on January 25th, 2023. Legal notice was posted in the Star News on February 16th and February 23rd. Potentially affected agencies were notified on February 6th. Property owners within 300 feet of the property line were notified by fact sheet sent February 7th. The notice and application were posted on the Valley County website on February 6th. The site was posted on February 24th. Agency comments received. Garrett DeYoung, McCall Fire Chief, has no comments. Wendy Howell, Idaho Transportation Department Development Project Coordinator, stated the following. This site abuts State Highway 55. Per the Idaho Administrative Procedures Act, improvements intended to serve patrons on private property adjacent to state highway right-of-way shall be set back from the highway right-of-way line so that stopping, standing, parking, or maneuvering of vehicles on the right-of-way is not necessary. A minimum setback of 14 feet from the state highway right-of-way line is needed unless a greater minimum is established by an engineering study. When an ordinance requires a certain number of parking spaces per square footage of the building, the parking spaces shall not be included within the state highway right-of-way. Public comments received, none. Listed different provisions of the Valley County codes here for your review, including setbacks for the area business and light industry. Showed you where it requires the 100-foot setback. Listed the prohibition of parking in setbacks. Showed you the codes that outline how you're supposed to proceed through a variance. And I do have some questions. The Planning and Zoning Commission needs to clarify the variance request on the southwest side of the property. Staff does not understand where the storage and parking are in the southwest corner. So that would be this area here. I think that they meant the southeast. Nope, southwest. So parking over here. That was in their application. And then the Planning and Zoning Commission should determine if there's a variance request for the parking lot in the southeast corner of the property. And we'll go through that. Planning and Zoning Commission decision should be a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners, and the site is within the McCall Fire District, the Lake Irrigation District, and a HERD district. This does have an individual well and individual septic system. So this is the property owned by the DYL partnership. These two parcels here. So this area, you can see that there are some wetlands that go through a portion of this according to this layer. And then this is the site plan. This is the parking I was talking about in the southwest. This is the southeast corner right here. But in their application, they said they believe the historic and current use of the temporary storage of materials in the setback adjacent to Highway 55 and in the southwest area of the site are specifically allowed. I don't think that there's any disagreement that parking and storage is allowed over here. And this is where the parking spots were on this site plan. This is the main building that you see. And here are all the different storage and construction buildings that were built. Trying to zoom in.
What's that blue stripe?
It's a ditch, I believe. Why it's blue. This is existing employee parking. This is an open storage area. This is existing storage yard. And here's some more employee parking back here. And here's the 100-foot setback to the edge of this building from the right of way. And that ends my staff report.
Okay, go ahead with questions for staff.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Senda. The primary issue is the storage of materials within that 100-foot setback between Highway 55, basically where the green mark is, correct?
In this area here, here's the 100-foot setback here.
Is the concern also in the other southeast corner? Is there potential violations of the setback there as well?
Just employees have randomly parked throughout here, and we've asked them to pull back into these approved parking spaces. I think that's the agreement. And then, yes, the variance request is to allow storage in this 100-foot setback area here.
So one of the questions I have is dealing with what temporary storage means. Is that temporary storage that portion of the site can be used in perpetuity for storage, temporary storage, or is that, and where I'm going with this is more of a long-term view. Highway 55 is not going to be 2 lanes in that location forever. It's going to be expanded. So when it's expanded at some point in time, and one of the reasons for the 100-foot setback is for future expansion of that road.
Can I stop you here?
Yeah.
And we move into the public hearing portion and then ask any questions you have of the applicant concerning these things, and then we'll do the deliberation later and stuff.
Right, but one of the questions I have is that storage, is that temporary storage as it's designated on the site plan, is the applicant asking to be able to use that as temporary storage all the time?
You should ask the applicant.
Okay.
They ask for a variance to allow storage in the setback area.
Cinda, one other question. This states that the applicant believes that this is permitted under CUP 99-1. I didn't see that in 99-1, but I wanted your clarification on if that was allowed in that CUP.
I was here. That was a long time ago. I don't believe that it was allowed based on this site plan. But regardless of what that was, they're asking for a variance.
Okay,
And the applicant, I mean, she's prepared to do her presentation and agree or disagree. But I don't think it included that, so, but that's why they're doing a variance.
Were there any other questions for staff?
No.
Okay. At this time, we'll hear a presentation by the applicant. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the commission. My name for the record, Abby Germain with Elam and Burke. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, Franklin Building Supply. My address is 251 East Front Street, Suite 300, Boise, Idaho, 83706. Also here with me this evening is Ken Levitt, who's the regional manager for Franklin Building Supply. He's here to answer any questions the commission may have about the actual operations on site and some of the specifics related to the site configurations. I will attempt to be very brief. I appreciate your time this evening. I know you have several other hearings after ours. Our full narrative and request, it was included in our application, which was submitted to the commission and the director on January 25th, 2023. That is contained in your packet this evening. The exhibits that the director showed you earlier were included in that material as well, so we'll be referencing to those this evening. I do have hard copies of those too, if that's necessary, because some of that writing is pretty small on that site plan. The reason that Franklin Building Supply is here this evening is to respectfully request a variance to use the 100-foot setback area adjacent to Highway 55 for storage and other activities, including staging of materials as they're being loaded and delivered for orders. There was some discussion just a moment ago about the southwest corner and the southeast corner. I think I'll address that really quickly because I think it resolves the issues. When we initially had the conversations related to this whole site, there was some conversation related to the southeast and the southwest portions of the property. I think Franklin Building Supply and the department are completely in agreement on that. We understand that the site plan shows that storage is allowed in that southwest area right there. I don't think there's a disagreement with the department on that. And then as it relates to parking in the southeast area, my client is more than amenable to strictly limiting that parking to what's indicated on that site plan. I think there has probably been some creep related to parking, and they've said that that'll be addressed and shouldn't be an issue moving forward. So coming back to the request this evening, as the director mentioned a moment ago, Franklin Building Supply is a lumber yard. It's been in existence since 1983. Throughout the years, it has done everything it can to comply with land use requirements and the requirements of the county. It's definitely its intent to be a good partner in this. These discussions originally occurred in 2022 last year, when it's our understanding that the department started to make some enforcement efforts related to setbacks along the scenic corridor on Highway 55. And so the department met with Franklin Building Supply and had some of those discussions about potentially moving the activities that are occurring in the setback to another location on site. As we discussed, it's our belief that we firmly have the ability to use that setback. In our opinion, it's clearly depicted on the site plan. I know that the director disagrees with that, and I'd like to take a moment to talk about what's the actual language on that site plan. But when those conversations began, Franklin Building Supply actually tried to move some of that activity out of the setback. And in doing so, they realized that it pretty much rendered the facility non-operational based on the construction of how things are laid out there. So if we could, Cinda, would you mind pulling up that site plan, please? So this is the site plan that's attached to the current CUP, and that's CUP 99-1. The language that you'll see highlighted in yellow there, and I know it's hard to read, but what it specifically states is existing storage yard. And then it gives actual dimensions and locations of where that storage yard exists. So it states existing storage yard, black top surface extends east and west from rail fence, which is that line indicated in the green, to irrigation culvert, which is that blue line to the east, and north to south from the cyclone fence, which is at the bottom indicated in, I believe, orange, and north to the existing storage building. Based on that language and the intent of what Franklin Building Supply was requesting when they asked for this CUP in 99, that clearly depicts that storage can occur all the way from the rail fence to the Blue Irrigation Culvert. So based on that, Franklin Building Supply felt that a variance was not even needed. But going through discussions with the department and the department's legal counsel, I believe that both parties felt that a variance was an appropriate resolution to this that would outline clearly what is allowed within this setback for Franklin Building Supply, and also provide clarity for the department as well as they go through with their enforcement efforts on 55. As the director pointed out, the criteria that must be met in order to issue a variance is outlined in Valley County Code. That's 9-5H-10. The criteria include the fact that an undue hardship would exist if the variance wasn't granted to the applicant. In this case, an undue hardship would be suffered by Franklin Building Supply if the variance isn't granted. And I'll talk a little bit about why that is. So there was a question by Commissioner Roberts about the use that's going on in that setback area. What is typically done in that setback area is two things. First, it's for staging and loading of materials. So an order comes in, Franklin Building Supply puts together that order and stages it there for a delivery truck to come in and take off. That activity can last from a couple hours to potentially overnight if it's a large order that they have to prepare for the next day. The reason that it's necessary to do that activity within that setback area is also a couple-fold. One, that area allows for a wide enough turnaround for heavy equipment such as forklifts or trailers. It also is designed with a drive-through aisle, basically, that a truck can come in and take materials, and they can be loaded by the forklift while doing so safely and efficiently. I think the next logical question is, well, why can't this activity happen on other areas of the site? Cinda, would you mind pulling up the GIS map? The reason that it can't occur in some of the areas that are also owned by Franklin Building Supply is that area where the cursor is at right there is actually a wetland. So that soil is unstable and cannot accommodate heavy equipment such as a forklift or trucks or trailers. There's also a septic system. So Cinda mentioned that that's in existence. Yep, right there. So that's another reason that they can't really drive heavy equipment in that area. The other main reason and characteristic of the site that's prohibiting them from moving activity is the berm that's really located close to that where the cursor is there. That berm was requested by the department in order to help shield some of the activity from residences to the west. Franklin Building Supply happily agreed to put that berm in for those purposes, but it has obviously drastically limited its ability to have operations in those other areas. So as it relates to the condition of undue hardship, if Franklin Building Supply isn't able to utilize that area that we believe is indicated on the site plan, it will drastically affect operations and will in some ways render it inoperable, which would result in millions of dollars in lost revenue, potential employee job loss, obviously impacts to county taxes if it's not operating at full capacity. So that's why we're requesting the variance this evening. I would note too, just for the commission, Franklin Building Supply has always been and tried to be a good partner to the community. They've reached out anytime they believed that land use requirement was necessary. They've asked the department about facade questions, as well as if there's any thing that the department would like as it relates to facades. They've tried to accommodate the dark skies initiatives along Highway 55. So really, they've attempted to be a good partner in this. This certainly isn't a circumstance where Franklin Building Supply is being obstinate to moving the materials. It really is a situation where they cannot operate if they're required to move those activities that they've been using and doing in that area for decades. So with that, I'll stand for any questions. Again, Ken's here if you have any site-specific questions, but we are respectfully asking the commission to grant the variance this evening and make a recommendation to county commissioners to approve that. And I'll stand for any questions.
I have one question. you said that everything past that building line to the west is wetlands? Everything? You couldn't move anything farther into there? It's all designated wetlands?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Swain, so the area is wetlands, and Ken can speak to the actual topography of that area. But in addition to that being wetlands, there's also that berm. So we would really have to destroy the berm and try and do something to the materials located in that area to even make that feasible. And I don't think that's something that the department would want to see. Obviously, that berm was requested. So really, it's not possible to put any operations in that area. Does that answer your question?
My question is that is not all wetlands.
I believe it is indicated as a wetland area. Cinda?
No, I turned on the wetland area and this is all that's shown.
The blue is the wetlands, isn't it?
So even if it's not dedicated as wetland, what you can see there just by the coloration on the map is that is all wet and it's soggy and they can't operate their equipment through there. That was one of the questions that we had initially when we started going through this was why can't we utilize that area? And it's just not feasible. So to your question, Commissioner Swain, yes, the dedicated wetland area is that sliver of blue, but it's not feasible due to the characteristic of the actual ground and land there.
Any other questions for the applicant?
You have a couple. Counselor, a couple questions in regard to the future of that storage space. Is it your client's intent that this temporary storage be granted into perpetuity? Or is this something, as I was stating earlier, about the 100-foot setback is for multiple reasons. That intersection has from time to time been discussed to create a left-hand turn lane there because of the activity that happens at that business and other areas. We just had another subdivision earlier this evening off that same lane. If ITD decides that becomes a left-hand turn lane intersection, say Highway 55 between McCall and Lake Fork becomes 4 lanes, now it's 5 lanes there. You have an acceleration or deceleration lanes. What happens then from your client's perspective when that fence needs to move?
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioner Roberts. So to answer your question directly, my client, the applicant, Franklin Building Supply, would be requesting a variance in perpetuity. We want to make clear that we don't have to come back and have this conversation again while those operations are occurring on the site. However, that doesn't mean that we're not fully aware of the provisions of eminent domain and others related to the potential of ITD to expand. And in the event that happened, obviously that would be another discussion about what was needed for both the ITD department and Franklin Building Supply. So from our perspective, we would be asking for it in perpetuity, but understanding that doesn't mean that expansion or other enforcement mechanisms won't be triggered in the future.
So follow-up, Madam Chairman, would you, and you may need to consult with your client on this, but would you be amenable to having the variance granted conditioned on expansion of ITD? Not that the value of the land is still eminent domain, still be have just compensation, but at least the use of the property subject to that.
Madam Chair, Commissioner, I believe that's something that I would have to discuss with my client. I would reiterate, I think they'd be in full agreement that the provisions of law related to eminent domain will apply whether or not this variance is in place. I mean, that won't trump that. So we certainly understand that. And if there was language to that effect, that we understand that other provisions may impede on this in the future, provisions that we have no control over, regardless of whether we have a CUP or a variance, I believe that there'd be no problem with something like that.
Right. You're in a position asking for a variance of a standard for the county. And so I may come back to this with our prosecuting attorney who's in the room as well. But my point is one of the reasons we have that 100-foot setback for activities and buildings and whatnot in that 100-foot zone is for that very purpose.
Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioner, understood. And again, in typical situations where you have setbacks, sometimes it prohibits parking or other activities. But one of the main reasons for a setback is permanent structures as well. And we certainly don't intend to put any permanent buildings or anything in like that. So I think in the event that issue arose in the future, we could certainly address it and figure out if there were other avenues or options.
And one of the other things that, and I know ITD brought it up in their comments, dealing with site restrictions, because there is no interchange there. When somebody pulls up on, what is that, Johnson Lane to the highway, if they can't see because there's bunks of lumber stacked 14 feet high up against the fence and that obstructs the view of pulling out on 55, that becomes a problem. So, and I've sent, well, we'll talk about this more later, but I believe that there was a 14-foot setback mentioned in that. And then maybe a question, I don't know if you can answer, maybe your client can, is currently from the property line, which I believe is the fence line, is there any landscaping distance that is established now, or is there none in that area along the fence? I know there is in the corners.
So, Madam Chair, Commissioner Swain, or Commissioner Roberts, excuse me, I will let Ken address kind of the operational aspect of that. What I will say as it relates to ITD and the 14-foot setback that was mentioned, in the IDAPA code section that they cite, it's actually incorrectly cited in their letter that they've sent to the commission. They say that 14 feet from the state highway right-of-way line is needed. The actual language in IDAPA says is recommended, and that is based on the nature of the site. So if there is a need in that area for turnarounds or other things that would facilitate the need for that 14 feet, it is recommended in those circumstances. In this situation, I will note for the commission that there is, Ken believes, probably over 14 feet from State Highway 55 to the property line. That area is kind of just, you can see it there between.
These aren't accurate lines.
Right. Are you talking from the pavement to the fence line?
From the pavement to the fence line. And that area, has been something that Franklin Building Supply has, attempted to maintain over the years as well. But there is some width between the road and the property line there.
Yeah, but that's in the highway right away.
And Madam Chair, Commissioner, I wouldn't disagree with that, but I think when you come back to the language that's included in IDAPA, it's really what is that setback trying to facilitate? And I just would offer to the commission that there is some width there between the property line and the road.
Okay, any other questions for the applicant?
I have one. Do you know, do you have an access permit here?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I just don't remember.
Would the commission like to hear from Ken?
I would, if you guys are done with the council.
My name is Ken Levitt. I'm a regional manager for Franklin Building Supply. My address is 2112 North Finsbury Way in Star, Idaho. I managed this location I've been with Franklin nearly 33 years. So I've been around, I haven't been there for 5 years, but it's still one of my locations I'm over. One of I think your concerns, Commissioner Roberts, is that use is, we call it staging area. There's nothing permanent there. The material comes and goes. It comes and goes. It's where we stage material to go on delivery trucks to be delivered. so there's nothing permanent there. Your 14-foot height, or you mentioned pulling up to that stop sign and looking down that lumber row. We agree. That's, we were asked by the county to lower that 2 years ago. We lowered that. And everybody, there was a complaint apparently by a resident. We didn't argue, we just lowered that material. The 15-foot that we're asking for in that setback, where those trucks are parked, you've got a 4-foot bed, and if you put 8-foot material on top of that, that puts you another 12 feet, and then if you throw a bunk of eyes, you could be possibly 15 feet high with that material. But you can see where the trucks are parked are about halfway between, they're sitting at about 50 feet, so they don't impede people pulling up to that driveway and looking. The units along the actual road are, I think we decided we'd keep them less than 10 feet, I think is what we tried to do to help traffic pulling up there. And we figured that when the complaint come in, it was probably people trying to get out on the highway. We had ITD talking to us years ago about putting a turning lane onto Johnson Lane there, so we knew that was in the works. It's obvious that there will be, at some point, more lanes on that highway, but we're not doing this because of that. I mean, when that comes, we'll cover that when that happens. This is keeping our operation moving today. We tried, moved it out of there when Cinda asked us to do it, hence us having to park on that southeast corner because we lost all of our employee parking. We moved all that material over where our employees were parking. It created a huge customer bottleneck. We tried moving some out in the back. It didn't work. It was inoperable. After we talked to Cinda, we said, can we move it back till we go through this? She said, yes, we'll go through this. Try to, Commissioner Swain, to address your question on that wetland area, if you could get that back up there, please, Cinda. That blue is actually a ditch. That's not the wetland. So the wetland is that dark green, which water runs across Johnson and comes out of that field that Axis used to own to the north. The ditch goes kind of in and through our property, just like the front ditch, even though it's in the wrong spot. That ditch is actually between our property line and the highway, and it does cross just like that shows. So the ditch doesn't go right through there. On that other one, they showed another line. There is actually a culvert going through. I can't remember what color that was on the other map. Somebody asked what that was through there. That's a culvert. It doesn't carry water, but when we, yeah, right there, that is actually a culvert coming through there from that other ditch on the other piece, even though it doesn't run water. You can go look at both ends and it doesn't run water, but it was needed to be put in there, so there is a culvert clear through that, draining out to the south. That area, Commissioner Swain, that shows that about going that direction, not only is that wet and swampy down in there, below that there is actually a hill. Below that berm that we were required to put in when we built those other buildings because of the neighbors to the west, that was part of our conditional use permit, was to put in that berm. But there is also a hill that drops off about 8 feet from our existing yard. And there's, kind of where up closer to the property line, Cindy, about where the last of the lumber is, down, right? Yeah, clear across there going to the south, there is actually a hill that drops off about 8 feet. The only way we've accessed, we used to have a burn pile down there. We couldn't take forklifts down there. If that was, it's impossible. We've thought about stacking lumber down there, and all we do is get forklifts
And
stuck.
Mr. Levitt, how long is that building we see closest to that area?
The big building there,
Yeah,
there's those two buildings are both the same size, and they would have been under our last conditional use permit. Those one building was permitted, and the other, I'm going to guess it's probably, I could look at my notes, but it's probably
125, somewhere in there.
Yeah, it's be wide. They're big buildings. They're big storage facilities. And we did those actually under 2 different years. We didn't put those in at the same time. They're about 3 or 4 years apart.
Cindy, could you go back to that wetlands picture? Is that possible?
I can. Give me a moment. Nope, wrong one. Over here.
Behind that building I just spoke of,
Mm-hmm.
you see that light colored area, is that mowed? That light colored before you
No.
ever get to the green?
No, it's dry. It's the hillside. It dries out. There's
dry.
no water there. As soon as you drop off and get into the darker green there, then there's water down in all that darker green.
Yeah, I see
there.
the dark green,
Yeah.
but if that building's 125 feet and you estimate there's 200 feet before you ever get to the green, and it just gets bigger as you come down, is that not correct?
It does, but it's considerably lower. You would have to build that up. I mean, 8-10 feet of fill, club in there, and then where do you access it? I guess you could access it. Yeah, it'd be
What elevation difference is that, would you say, that light brown to the elevation of your building?
10 feet lower, 8 to 10 would be my guess.
And I guess my question is, in order to grant a variance, you must show undue hardship. Is your statement that to push that berm over, use some of that as fill, and to bring fill in there is an undue financial hardship to put it there instead of out in front?
Then where do you move your staging area? The staging area, I mean, at some point, if the highway takes over the property, I mean, I guess we'd have to figure that out. But that, you couldn't use that as a staging area. The staging area was set up when we were give the conditional use permit for the paving and everything. I mean, it does, I don't quite understand and I understand your question, Commissioner Swain, but we paved an area for a staging area that now we're saying we can't use for a staging area. That was approved and shown on that CUP that it was a staging area.
I
And the
don't
berm
have
was
a copy of that CUP, or I don't have that. You've seen it, that was designated in that CUP?
It's right on the plot plan.
That yellow she was showing me, I really couldn't read that.
Yeah. And there again, to your point on the berm, then what are the neighbors to the west going to say when they required, that was part of our conditional use permit to do those buildings, and that was, we put a berm there to block the material from them and any forklift traffic.
And how high is that berm?
Probably 6-7 feet.
So fencing could accomplish the same thing.
Excuse me?
Fence could accomplish that. If the berm was removed, a 6 or 7 foot fence could accomplish that.
A privacy fence?
Yeah.
I would imagine.
I think there's two issues here. I believe you have room to expand, therefore it's not an undue hardship. But if in fact you were given that area in a CUP prior to this as a staging area, and that's made known to me clearly, I don't know that you need to move it.
Commissioner Swain, that was our point in the beginning when we met with Cinda, was saying, why now, after 20-some years of history, and we have a CUP that says it was for a staging area, are we now having to move this? That was our point, and we come to the conclusion that, well, the only way we're going to get through this is where we're here today.
So if that's proved, you don't even need the variance, do you?
That's what we was told we should do.
Remember, we disagreed.
Commissioner Roberts, do you have questions as well?
So I do. Ken, thank you for being here tonight. You've heard my line of questioning to your council about expansion of Highway 55. Would you be amenable to the variance being granted with a condition that is subject to highway expansion? Now, that does not mean that the value of the land would be not compensated for, but the use of the land would be subject to that.
That would be something that we would need to talk to the owners of the property. That's an investment company that owns the property. Yeah, that's not Franklin Building Supply.
So, okay.
But absolutely, we could take that step. but I can't answer that question.
Any other questions? No?
Thank you.
Is there anything else council would like to add at this time?
No, Madam Chair, Commissioners, unless there's any other follow-up questions.
I don't think there are any at this time. So now we will go ahead and hear testimony of proponents. Any testimony of uncommitted? Testimony of opponents? Okay. One last chance for the applicant to.
Madam Chair, Commissioners. Commissioner Swain, I do have hard copies of that site plan if that would be easier to read. I know that it's hard to see on the screen, but so I can hand those to the commission if you'd like.
Is that something that we have to accept?
It's in your staff report.
Okay.
It's
Or
just
it
a
doesn't
blown up.
matter.
Would anyone else like to know?
Notes specifically, it's just, yeah,
No, I don't
I
think so.
couldn't read mine either.
This contains both the.
Thank you. I should have one for the record, whatever you're giving them. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, just in closing, again, Franklin Building Supply believes that the current use for staging and temporary storage is allowed on the site plan that was approved in CUP 99-1. Based on negotiations with the department, we felt that a variance was a amicable resolution to just clarify the issue, and so that's why we're pursuing that variance with the commission today, and we would ask for the approval from the commission this evening.
Thank you. Now we will close the public hearing for deliberations by the commission.
Madam Chairman, I think I need a little bit more information. And I'm maybe gonna need to defer to our staff about how to go about this, but I think the idea and the concept of putting a restriction on there needs to be, I think that the applicant needs to go get an answer from their folks as well. I would like to have some information from our prosecuting attorney to make sure that we can do that, make it subject to expansion of state highway.
Can I clarify what you mean by that? Is that like an awareness of the potential for eminent domain?
No, what I'm getting at is an understanding that see, when the county grants entitlements to a piece of property or conditions of approval, or not conditions, but uses, that use sometimes will equate to a value of the property. And so under an eminent domain, I'm not an attorney here, but I think under an eminent domain case, if there was a granted use on a piece of property and it was taken over by ITD, that use would have to be compensated for. So in my mind, I think we need to get a little more answer. I think this is a perfect example of an application where I think we need a little more information from our folks. I think they need to have a conversation as well.
Commissioner Roberts, I agree, unless the majority of the commission has a different perception of this. So I think before we move forward with a table or anything of that sort, we need to hear from the rest of the commission and their thoughts. Commissioner Childs?
I agree. I think that giving a variance for this 100 feet is, it's something that we need to question and take really seriously. I couldn't read the portion, however, in yellow, and now that I know what it states, it does to me look like their original CUP, the 99-1, was approved with this, so I do feel conflicted about that, what they were already potentially approved for and what they've been using it for the last 20 years. But if we want to get a little bit further information before we grant a variance and make any changes to this, I'm okay with that.
Commissioner Swain?
Well, I'm against granting a variance because I'm not sure he needs one. But if we were to grant this one, I don't sure it classifies under undue hardships. And my fear is unintended consequences if we grant this. Everybody along that road's gonna want one when they get wind of this one. I just think it sets a precedence to make undue hardship easier. But having said that, I'm still under the impression now, being able to read this, that Franklin doesn't need a variance. You can conduct business the way you've been conducting business there.
Okay.
I
Commissioner
agree
Freeman?
with Commissioner Swain. I mean, that note is pretty clear with the lines that kind of go out pointing to that area. I think it's very clear that that was the intent from the get-go. So I guess I don't see why they're here, in my opinion.
I tend to agree with you. I do like to, or I would like to point out, there's
Who's you, me or him?
both
Okay.
Commissioner Swain and Commissioner Freeman, sorry, as well as the others. On the site map, though, it does very clearly point out that there's a 100-foot setback on the map. It's right down here in front of the retail building. And that goes to show me that that entire span is a 100-foot setback. So it's in direct conflict with their existing storage yard and where it says the blacktop surface extends east to west from rail fence to irrigation. So I think the site plan itself contradicts itself.
Was the original intent to apply to lay down area that rotates throughout the day, or was it to apply to permanent structures?
For storage.
I don't know that any of us can answer that from
I was here.
1999.
I was
Except
here
for-
too, and I don't remember.
Okay. Well,
Sorry.
that's why we're asking for the variance. My recollection is that they could drive through there, they could lay down stuff, people could pick it up. That it wasn't intended for parking and storage of materials. It was, I mean, they could use it for driving through, that's why they blacktopped it.
So are they using it for storage or lay down, for building loads to go out? I mean, do we have to get that?
According to the
Down to the
presentation, it was,
definitions.
their temporary was sometimes day, but could be overnight.
So is that just lay down or is that storage? And how do we define between the two?
Right.
And the ordinance says that no parking in the setback, so that's why we recommended the variance.
The ordinance says no parking setback, yet the trucks are very clearly parked within the setback. Just comments. So with that, we're back to Commissioner Roberts' comments.
But maybe just a little more information that we could explore other options. Instead of being forced into a yes/no decision tonight. I think this is one of those cases where we might need to get some more information about what other options would be. Let the applicant have a discussion with their owners to see what they would, now that they've heard our discussion. Allow some time for some communication.
Commissioner Roberts, with further discussion, could the applicant identify what he's doing in that area and that letter be given as a parameter of what he can do, where he can't store stuff there for a week? It might be overnight, but it's to load trucks and he's gonna be gone. I know we talk about our personal experiences for years. I've driven by there and I've seen them loading trucks and the trucks are gone. If that's feasible of what the use you interpret this to mean, and that would be the standard that we could hold you to, perhaps that's an option.
So if they can better define exactly what they're doing, like this out here is not, is that permanent or is that, I mean, what are we doing here?
So clarification from staff, would we table this?
Mhm.
So the motion would be to table it with a request for certain information?
So, and I don't want to go a long time, but what's our regular meeting in
April.
Well, we have a couple public hearings scheduled.
May?
Second,
May 2nd?
May 11th. It's May 11th. May 11th.
Madam Chairman, I'll try a motion, see what happens. I would move that we hold for further consideration and more information gathering variance 1-23 Franklin Building Supply setback variance until the regular meeting on May 11th, allowing time for the applicant to gather information and the county.
And that is information, can we do a condition that does not,
Explore options and
concerning the variance and whether that creates a value?
and
And then a better defining what they're going to be doing in that 100 feet? And what do they mean by temporary storage? Is that just a day? Is that?
Yeah.
Right. A better definition.
heating storage.
And would you like to see the 99-1 application,
Yes.
minutes and stuff like that? We can get you a copy of that so you can look at it too.
I'll second the motion.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, the CUP 23-02, oh, no, wrong one.
And that one will,
I was on the wrong page.
you've tabled it, so we'll have to reopen the public hearing to get that into the record.
So V-1-23 Franklin Building Supply setback variance will be tabled until May 11th at our standard meeting, and it will be a public hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, well, let's take a short break. We'll plan to be back at 7:40. I planned on it, don't worry. Mr. Swain did. Okay, we will call the meeting back to order after our break and move on to our next application. Okay, everyone, we're gonna move on now to CUP 23-01 Sands 55 subdivision. This is a preliminary plat. At this time, I will open the public hearing. Has there been any ex parte contact, or does anyone have a conflict of interest?
No.
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 Okay, we'll go ahead and hear the staff report.
Okay, the staff report for 2301 Sands 55 subdivision preliminary plat. The applicant's Lake Fork 55 LLC. The property is located in the west half of Section 3, Township 17 North, Range 3 East of the Boise Meridian, Valley County, Idaho, and it's 10.3 acres. Lake Fork 55 LLC is requesting a conditional use permit for a 4-lot mixed-use subdivision that includes commercial use, light industrial, and multiple residences, which would be apartments. The site is 10.3 acres, and on your staff report, Lot 1, there's a table that shows Lot 1 will be used for a specific commercial use with 2 apartments above the garage. That would be here. Lot 2 is undetermined at this time, but there will be residential uses above it. Lot 3 is commercial or light industrial without any residences. And then Lot 4 is this flag lot here. The apartment buildings would have garages on the first floor and residences on the second floor. Individual wells and individual septic systems are proposed. No buildings or parking would be allowed in the 100-foot setback from Highway 55. The plat contains 2 shared access sites from Highway 55, and the internal driveways would be paved. The project site does not have wetlands according to a letter submitted by Department of Army Corps of Engineers on December 15, 2005. The site is located in the Lake Fork Village as designated in the Valley County Comprehensive Plan. A variance is requested for the requirements of a wildland urban fire protection plan since there are no trees on the property. The applicant is requesting the approval of building permits prior to recording the final plat. The complete application was submitted on January 30th. The documentation from the neighborhood meeting held on February 23rd is also attached. Legal notice was posted in the Star News on February 16th and February 23rd. Potentially affected agencies were notified on February 6th. Property owners within 300 feet of the property line were notified by fax sheet sent February 7th. The notice and application were posted on the Valley County website on February 6th, and the site was posted on February 24th. Agency comments received. Central District Health stated application, test holes, groundwater monitoring, engineering, and specific information on the intended use of commercial and light industrial structures will need to be provided. Wendy Howell, Idaho Transportation Department, replied with requirements. A traffic impact study reflecting the full build-out is required, and then Form 2109 must be submitted. Garrett DeYoung, McCall Fire Chief, stated requirements for a 30,000-gallon water storage tank for fire protection and automatic fire sprinkler systems for the mixed-use buildings. Emily Hart, McCall Airport Manager, states that this site is over 3 miles from McCall Airport, and airport management has no comments. Public comments received, none. Physical characteristics of the site, relatively flat, no wetlands, except for a little strip where the irrigation district is, irrigation ditch. I'll show that to you. This is the property here. Oh, nope, no wetlands. I thought it went through here. Surrounding land use and zoning includes to the north, single-family residential and agricultural, south, commercial businesses, east is Highway 55, commercial businesses, light industrial, single-family residential, and then CUP 21-32 that's been approved for office and residential condos. West is single-family residential and agricultural. Valley County Code and Table 9-3-1 categorizes this proposal under 2 residential uses, J, multiple residences on 1 parcel, 5 commercial uses, and 6 industrial uses with some light industry. We listed the various standards out of the Valley County Code for your review, mostly specifically the 100-foot setback from Highway 55, the different setbacks for the different types of uses. road and driveway requirements, parking requirements. We talked about screening, parking areas with more than 10 spaces from residential uses. Prohibited uses in setback zones, no part of a parking area shall be located within a required setback zone, such as side, front, or rear yard. Talked about lighting, the fencing requirements, utilities, commercial or industrial activities, and noise impacts, and then the residential uses. Listed the codes for the subdivision regulations for preliminary plats, because this is a preliminary plat. And then staff's compatibility rating was positive 30. The Planning and Zoning Commission should do their own compatibility rating. Staff comments. The site is within the McCall Fire District and Lake Irrigation District boundaries. It is not within a HURD district. Parking cannot be located in setback areas. Parking is shown in the side setback areas in the original submittal. And that was in this area, but they've changed it. This has been corrected in the revised preliminary plat that we received March 1st. Specific uses and or limitations of types of commercial and industrial uses on Lot 2 should be designated. They need to better define that instead of just saying commercial or industrial. They need to list the types that will be allowed there. The applicant is requesting the approval of a building permit prior to recording the final plat. The building department typically does not issue building permits without Central District Health approval of a septic system. When will landscaping be placed? Will it be financially guaranteed? And then see the February 28th submittal for the proposed uses on Lot 2. Those were attached. Proposed conditions of approval are as follows. 1, the application, the staff report, and the provisions of the land use and development ordinance are all made part of this permit as if written in full herein. Any violation of any portion of the permit will be subject to enforcement and penalties in accordance with Title 9-2-5 and may include revocation or suspension of the conditional use permit. Any change in the nature or scope of land use activities should require an additional conditional use permit. The issuance of this permit, these conditions will not relieve the applicant from complying with applicable county, state, or federal laws or regulations, or be construed as permission to operate in violation of any statute or regulation. Violation of these laws, regulations, or rules may be grounds for revocation of the conditional use permit or grounds for suspension of the conditional use permit. The final plat shall be recorded within 2 years, or this permit will be null and void. Must have an approved stormwater management plan and site grading plan approved by the Valley County engineer prior to any work being done on site. Wetland delineation must be updated, and that's the Army Corps of Engineer letter of determination should be updated. Must bury conduit for fiber optics with utilities. A declaration of installation of utilities shall be recorded and noted on the face of the plat. A letter of approval is required from McCall Fire District prior to recording the final plat. CC&R should address septic maintenance, dark sky compliant lighting, wildfire prevention, noxious weeds, and limit each lot to one burning device. All lighting must comply with the Valley County lighting ordinance. Shall place addressing numbers on each building. All easements shall be shown on the final plat. Shall create a shared access maintenance agreement and note it on the plat as a recorded document. Building permits will be approved prior to recording of the final plat. However, final occupancy will not be approved until after the recording of the final plat. So that's a condition for your consideration. Planning and zoning director will need to approve proposed use for lot 2. A conditional use permit may be required. If lots are sold in the future, conditional use permits may be required depending on the use. This note should be placed on the final plat. The following notes should be placed in the notes on the face of the final plat. These are just our typical notes required on all plats, so I won't go through those. And what I'm getting at with the list of permitted uses is, I mean, our CUP in this plat does not create a zone. It's not a commercial zone or a light industrial zone. It has to be an approved use. They know currently what they're going to be putting on lots 1 and 3. But if those uses change, they may need another conditional use permit. And that should be decided. We've done this before with the Swains Lake Fork Business Park, where they set parameters of what could be located in those buildings. And we also did it with the subdivision there on Burr Drive. Those were pre-approved also for specific categories of uses. And anything outside that, the P&Z director can decide that they need to come back to the P&Z Commission for a conditional use permit. So on the plat, you can see that they have two entrance points. One is here, one is here. So these will be shared easements. They're going to have cross-access easements. And since this staff report was prepared, we received what you're seeing on the screen. And we updated that. And then Exhibit 1 is updated civil plans. And we gave you copies of those. The irrigation ditch you're referring to is the one along the western boundary line, not the one that cuts through the property. There's a question. My question to them was, what are you doing with this ditch? And I want them to explain that so everybody understands. And then there's another ditch that goes behind. And so you can see it here. And then this one here. We need to know specifically what they're doing with those. They're going to have approval from Lake Irrigation District, of course. And this, let's see, a letter from Michelle and Dave Butler. And they wanted to attend tonight, but they were unable to do so. And I had asked if they ever see water in the ditch. And they say, yes, this water is being used by them, neighbors and ranchers to the south, and it's Lake Irrigation District. And we have a letter from Lake Irrigation District. This is Exhibit 2. Everybody have a copy of that? Okay. And they state it has a delivery ditch running along the west side of the property and on the southeastern corner. Lake Irrigation District holds an easement along the ditches wide enough to allow for access for operation, cleaning, maintenance, and repairs, a minimum of 15 feet on lateral ditches. They talk about their easements. There's a concrete siphon shown on the map, and it's not abandoned. It's an LID facility along with a ditch that runs south from it. Any water runoff from the pavement cannot enter into the irrigation facility. And then when land is divided, it needs to be split according to Idaho Code 31-3805. What water rights do. If that doesn't happen, a disclosure statement stating such must be included in the sales agreement. And I'm sure the applicant's going to work with Lake Irrigation District. And then Michelle and Dave Butler submitted a letter dated yesterday. This is part of that email. And then they submitted a follow-up from the neighborhood meeting. They're requesting from Idaho Transportation Department that the speed limit be lowered to 45 miles per hour. And she actually spoke with Justin Price at ITD, and they're going to be doing a study, I believe, in 2024. She spoke with Ryan Montoya about when that will be done. They're requesting from ITD wildlife crossing signs be moved to where they think the wildlife will be crossing in the future. And then they appreciate Ryan made time to address their concerns. And they would like to, for the record, note that the driveway access will be addressed at a later date because this is their driveway access and they would like that back. That lot 4, this piece here. Okay, and the Butlers, I believe, yeah, that's their place right there. But they're extremely interested in getting this back. Okay. That ends my staff report.
Okay, any questions for staff?
Cindy, does the applicant own the parcel just to the left of your cursor?
Sure. No, that's Butler.
Okay, so the applicant owns the strip up along the highway, is that correct?
Right. I believe when this was done way back in the day, Judy Leister had this. And I believe I can't remember if the Butlers purchased this and she kept this because ITD wanted her access a certain distance apart.
Shared
Remember
driveway.
that?
Yeah.
But now ITD wants a different configuration. They want this. And so Michelle wants this back. Is my understanding.
And I have a couple questions. On page 4 of this cover letter he did, he stated that he provided an Army Corps of Engineers letter of approval that was dated back in 1/30/23, that Mike Forrest, gentleman that previously did this. But that letter has a 5-year life to it.
Right.
So we're gonna need to, I
That's
didn't
why-
see where it said we had to get a new letter.
That's why we put the condition in there that they'd have to get a new letter. Those are only good for 5 years. I think they were just demonstrating that they previously had permission to make a determination and they're probably pursuing an additional one. But you can ask them.
Also on this property where you see that deep green going through the property,
Mhm.
there exists, and I believe it's lake irrigation, there's an underground irrigation ditch that comes across that property and that's where it exits. From there on, there is no lake irrigation easement there. It's just, they talk about the easement on the west side, is that green strip through the middle of the property part of an easement for lake irrigation?
Yes, in their letter,
We talk about it being on the west side.
they have a delivery ditch running along the west side of the property and on the southeastern corner. They hold an easement along these ditches wide enough to allow for access. And so I'm assuming that this is the southeastern corner that they're talking about, since this property goes up to here. But they're gonna have to work with Lake Irrigation
Yeah, to
District
move
on
that
any
easement to where they
moving,
propose.
tiling, anything.
And the concrete siphon is the siphon that goes under the state highway. That is the start of that ditch, is that correct?
The concrete siphon shown on the map is not an abandoned siphon. This is the LID facility. And so, it's shown on here. I'm pretty sure the applicant can tell you all about it.
Okay.
I can't read this.
Any other questions for staff? this time. I'm sorry, Cindy, did that complete your staff report?
That
I'm not trying
completes-
to rush you.
Yes, I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Now we will go ahead and have a presentation from the applicant. Please state your name and address for the record.
Evening, Commissioners. My name is James Stronk. I reside at 14028 Norwood Road, McCall, Idaho. And to begin with, I'll start with just the site plan itself. We can use this if you prefer. The land is predominantly flat. You see the irrigation ditch which would be the northwest corner that comes across there. Around the back on the west, Cindy's pointer is pointing it out. That has an easement dedicated. Then if you go to the right, and it's to the north and heading east, triangulate across the piece of property that the Butlers own, that is their irrigation feed coming from across the road and through there. What this plan does not show, and which we discussed in our neighborhood meeting, is that it will have on final plat a deeded easement for that purpose, with enough room for them to access and clean and so forth. The middle swale that goes through building lot 2 and through lot 1, I guess it is 3, 1 and 2. That is a drainage swale, and it has been there for some time. I previously worked on the previous project on this in the early 2000s and conducted a wetland delineation on this and received the letter that I provided to staff. And you're correct, we are in the process of getting an updated letter. The Corps is aware of that, and we're working together on that. At that time, we found no wetlands within that drainage. Short term, it's short-lived, and the project proposes to fill that in. The other irrigation ditch that they're talking about is, if you can go down and point to where it says abandoned siphon, which is further to the left, right from there. If you go to the east, you see that line right below you, to the east.
This is, to the east, I'm sorry, right here.
Yeah, right there. This says abandoned siphon.
Oh.
And the Lake Fork Irrigation District is pointed
Sorry,
out.
Mr. Funk, could you make sure, so we can have you on record? Thank you.
Get away from myself. Sorry about that. So Lake Fork Irrigation pointed out that it is not abandoned. It may appear that way, but it's not. And that ditch runs along the west side of the road, or the east side of the road along the highway, and then turns west up that boundary into that drainage right there. We understand that we have to continue that conveyance, and there's an easement going to be associated with them as well. And clarity to all that will be worked out with the district. As stated by staff, it's a 4-lot subdivision. 2 of the lots, 1 and 3, have proposed uses that are in place, waiting for this process to go through, and they are identified on her staff report. And I'll get to those uses in a little bit further in about how to further clarify them, as done in previous applications. Lot 2 is commercial, light industrial as indicated. And I'll get into those uses in just a little bit further. In the back on lot 1, you see a 2-unit residential, which is basically workforce or housing proposed for lot 1's employees. Lot 2 has 3 units that's being proposed. And those will, right now it's undetermined if they're going to be workforce housing or both, open to the public based on market standards of the time. Lot 3 does not have any component of the residential. Fire, Donnelly Fire, we've had discussions with on several occasions.
McCall Fire.
McCall Fire, yes. Garrett just talked to me the other day. They're requiring a 30,000 gallon storage tank with the appropriate water diverted off one of the wells, and then their standard for able to get the water out of it. So that is the fire requirement for the commercial buildings, the light commercial buildings for lots 1, 2, and 3. The two lots 1 and 2 will require residential sprinkling to that standard. For both up and down, first and second floor levels. You'll see in your packet that we have one ITD letter that states that we have to have some study done. And I think it's inaccurate. It's a new person. I was working with a person before that. She is replacing the one that had left. Her job is basically project coordination, and I think what that is a standard letter that she pipes out on all the requests. You'll see in your packet that we do have approval from ITD on these two entrances and the requirements that are required as far as traffic control and when things happen. So those are in place and have been approved. As far as the traffic circulation on this property, as you can see, there's two entrances, and it goes from north to south of the property in front of the light industrial commercial. And the initial, I'll clarify in a second, that will be paved as it is described in the application. We will pave that area, and I'm just talking about that specific area in front of the commercial buildings. Is that clear for you, Laurie? That's what I was saying. But we won't do that until 1 year of letting the area settle for paving. We'll gravel it and then come in with the paving after all the construction is completed. Lot 1 shows the area to be gravel behind the commercial and in between the residential components. And that is to stay in place. We may come back at a future date to pave it, but right now we're waiting to see how that use works. It may not be appropriate for what they do. You see it, lots 2 and 3, we have it as asphalt. We wanted to put on the record that we think we should, after conversation with the clients and the owner, future owners, they want to keep that as gravel with the ability to pave in the future after they see how their land use works with the paving in the rear. So it's those two, lots 2 and 3, are slightly different than in the application. It says paving for those two. We're requesting to be able to gravel it, not pave it at this time. We have completed our civil drawings, and they are in the process of being submitted to the Valley County engineers for their review for drainage grading, snow storage requirements, stormwater treatment requirements, and so forth. We've had some preliminary discussions, as I do with the Valley County engineer about these projects, about our intent and what they should expect to see from us. The Central District Health Department has been on site. We've gone through the monitoring process. This would be twice. So I have data from the 2000s and then what I did this previous year. So they have the data from those two periods, plus the field work that we excavated, and they reviewed the test hole information. So they're waiting for us to have the septic engineering report that needs to be completed for them to review and approve so that they can sign off on the plat with restrictions removed. So that will happen between now and final plat. Staff indicated that there's some inner lot exchanges of movement back and forth for circulation and various reasons, and we understand that we have to have that agreement along with the CCNRs and HOA for their review on those things. We did conduct a residential meeting in the area and had a pretty good turnout of the adjacent neighbors. In your packet, you see what was discussed, and then in red, you see what, in response to those questions. In a nutshell, there was concerns about the residential component that we were proposing, and explained to them about this is workforce housing and that it's something that's needed in the community. They agreed. They were concerned about noise and visual. And so in your comments, you'll see that we discussed about additional screening of trees where the irrigation dish is not interfered with, and there's some room to do that. We discussed the design of the second floor of the workforce housing / apartment complexes, where there are concerns about people able to be able to see out and view their properties, which they're pretty large parcels and have some distance between these. Mr. Montoya described to them that and showed some architectural drawings and renderings that those patios are recessed within the building. So basically the eave comes down and blocks a good portion of it. So there's only a certain portion that you can see out of, and they're recessed into the building. So they're not hanging out on stilts or posts. And they understood once we described that. So in summary, we're working our CCNRs to talk about noise and the hours that we have to have in our HOAs. We're talking about the screening that we're installing, and we're talking about what activities as far as people have with their animals on this 2 apartment sites and what would be allowed and not allowed as far as noise and control. So it was a good meeting. I think most part that covers a lot of this site. It's very similar to what's around the area. It's been expected. There was no surprises in the neighborhood meeting that this was coming along. They all said, yeah, we expected it. And I'm here to stand for questions. Do you have any? And
I do.
yes,
So
Commissioner.
you're proposing total of 5 residential units?
2 for lot 1, 3 for lot 2.
Okay. Where are the septic systems for those units?
They are dedicated to each of their own lots. Each one of those lots have their own septic system.
I see the tank and the field for the building, but
Yes.
I don't see any tanks.
Well, the tanks are combined. You don't see that on this drawing, but the civil drawings have, this
On each
didn't get
building,
into
I
this.
see a septic tank and a drain field and a replacement field.
Yeah, well, they're right there, centrally located by that. I don't have the civil drawings to show you that.
So I'm just asking where are the residential septics for the 5 units?
Well, 2 on lot 1 are associated with the septic field that you see in that area right there, combined with the commercial. The septic area that you see on lot 2 is for the 3 units and the commercial.
So their size to.
Their size has considered the units that are residential and the commercial activity.
And you stated that you're using the water monitoring from 2005. You did one last year and you're waiting for this year's?
No, we're done with the monitoring. The health district agrees that these sites meet their criteria and do not have an opposition about what they saw. It's my job next to do, and it goes kind of in process after you get the preliminary plat.
Sure.
To a certain point, then you go into the next level of engineering.
But Jim, you're convinced that those septics where they're located will work?
Yes, I am.
Okay, that kind of answers that question.
Yeah.
When you talk to the neighboring owners, the only one I can see is a house pretty close that was mitigated on the last CUP.
The Butlers, yes.
The Butler's homes, I don't know if
Yeah.
they're still there or not. And I noticed on your landscape plan that you show a row of bushes or trees to kind of buffer that.
Correct. And that's going to extend further south, covering Lot 2.
And isn't that agricultural use
On
on that parcel? Is there a house on that one?
That's ranch use.
Ranch land, so it's agricultural.
But if you pull back away a little bit further,
Where Butler's is a residence, the other is agricultural, correct?
right,
This is Butler's,
and that's the other
and this is
landowner.
Shoemaker.
Shoemaker.
Okay.
Lot 2 will end about right here.
Yeah. So their concern was people were able to look out the balconies. It wasn't so much the Butlers, but the Shoemakers. About people be able to look out the balconies and see over their property.
Mr. Funk, could you back up to the microphone again, please?
I've been here too long. It used to be right here so I could talk. Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for reminding me.
Sorry about
Keep
that.
me honest. The Shoemakers were concerned about Lot 2 and those units. And once it was explained how the architectural site and the recessed patios and the overhang was described, they were okay with that. They asked if we could add fencing to the end of Lot 2, which was acknowledged that we would, and if we could add additional trees. And that's what you see in our correspondence and what we agreed to.
So you're in contact and negotiating with them and mitigating this, right?
Yeah, we had a meeting at the Gemma's upstairs, and we spent an hour and a half kind of getting to go and know each other. It was a very nice meeting, and this is what came out of it. And in your packet, you see a summary letter that was done by Mr. Montoya of what was discussed at that meeting. What was the concerns that were expressed, what was discussed and agreed upon in red, and then it was transmitted to staff so that they could see that we had it. And then Michelle Butler was kind of the leader of the neighborhood and was representing a couple other people that could not attend. And out of that came was thank you very much for working with us, and we'll send some correspondence to staff as well. And I think you see that in your packet.
Well, unless I hear opposition to that fact, I think you solved one of my concerns, is mitigating those
Yes, sir.
properties.
Any other questions for the applicant? No? Okay, thank you. At this time, we will take testimony from the public. As a reminder, you will have a 3-minute time limit. So now we'll start with testimony of proponents. Is there anyone uncommitted that would like to testify? How about testimony of opponents? No? Okay. Is there anything else that the applicant would like to add at this time? No? Okay, thank you. Then we will close the public hearing and turn it back to the commission for their deliberations.
The only thing that really jumped out to me, and it's probably petty, but talking about having trees along that back irrigation ditch for screening, how much room do you have to keep the roots from getting into the ditch? How far out will those reach over time? That concern, is that something we should be worried about or not?
You
Seems
guys
like that would
tipped the
be something-
microphone down. I don't know how it got pushed up.
Seems like that would be something they would have to agree with on the irrigation district. Might be
Right.
a topic to discuss with them. I have a question for staff. In the application, there was a request to allow building permits before final plat, correct? Is it that common?
No, it's not common. Because typically the subdivisions we do are, to be sold to somebody else. I know that in some of the PUD ones, they wanted some building permits for some spec homes. But they didn't get approval from the P and Z, and so we didn't issue those building permits until they had final plat. So I think that's a discussion amongst the Planning and Zoning Commission, if they want to go ahead and allow us to issue the permit, subject to withholding a certificate of occupancy until they record the plat.
Okay.
I mean, that's, what is the P and Z Commission thinking on that? That's why we put it out there. I know that the building department won't issue a building permit unless they have Central District Health approval.
To that thought, Catlin, my only thought was making sure, and the application kind of stated two different things about ITD, but it sounds like they do in fact have approval from ITD. But I'm okay with the applicant requesting those building permits prior to final plat, as long as they have Central District Health approval. They've worked out the irrigation component of this, and they've worked with ITD. And that's just my personal feeling on that, is to keep their progress moving forward.
Well, and that's why I brought it up, just to facilitate some discussion. I know we saw that one of the tenant of Lot 3 would like to start immediately. That's why I brought that up, so we get the perspective of the commission.
I believe that was a condition that was on here also.
I think another thing I'd like to add is I really like this application, and I really appreciate that the applicant is putting in workforce housing. And I know that's the intent, but I would love to see in the CCNRs that it was going to remain workforce housing and not necessarily a deed restriction, but something in the CCNRs that just in perpetuity, this is not going to be a short-term rental, at any point in time, just so that the community can kind of be assured that in these applications, this is workforce housing, for the long haul. And I know that that's the intention, but I'd love to see that added as well.
I picked up some conditions of approval, if you want to hear those, as you were talking.
Definitely.
We'll provide easement for ditch on Lot 4 and Lot 1 in cooperation with the Lake Irrigation District. They had mentioned that they'll do those two easements. Must have ITD permit, may or may not pave areas behind the buildings. Right, because at this time they weren't sure. But I think we need to be clear. Sasha's, the building permits will be approved prior to recording a final plat. However, final occupancy will not be approved until after recording of the final plat. And we could say building permits will be approved prior to recording a final plat upon approval by Central District Health, Lake Irrigation, and Idaho Transportation Department. Change that condition of approval.
And also the wildlife variance for the wildlife mitigation plan.
I think that they just wanted ITD to move the signs.
Do we have to grant the variance for a plan,
The fire.
fire plan?
Oh, the Wildland Urban Interface Fire Protection
There's
Plan.
no timber.
But 10-7 says that everybody has to submit it. So we have a form now for people that just want to do their own. And if they complete that and submit it, I think that would suffice. I can show it to you if you'd like to see it.
I thought that was part of the application.
Was to not have one.
Right, they said they didn't want to have one.
But there's a separate application process to acquire that.
Well, it sounds like now they can just do it themselves directly through you,
And submit it for the record.
and that would be approved through final plat.
Right. I can show it to you real quick. Is this it? Stephanie worked on a form that they can just complete and fill out. They just have to answer these questions and submit it to the record. Okay, we just put this on the website.
What about the types of industrial commercial uses on lot 2?
Okay, what they had submitted, we received February 28th. It says, while it's difficult to ascertain the specific future use, the following are uses not exclusive that are considered to be complementary for the project. Residential and/or affordable housing, workforce housing, repair business, auto, small engine repair, appliance, or other service business. My concern with that one is there might need to be special drains or something if there's any oil associated with it. There might be Central District health concerns with engine repair.
So maybe it makes sense to have a separate application for that.
Well, building materials, retail, wholesale, enclosed manufacturing, packing or warehousing, except meat packing plants, general business and transfer station. I don't know what those are. I think they need to get more specific and have you approve the list as part of the final plat.
Or they could come back before us for a CUP.
Right, because I know on Swains Lake Fork Business Park, it was a lot more concise what could be there, as well as Smitty's that was down on Bird Drive. This is kind of why I don't know what transfer station is.
I tend to agree with the chairman that that might come back as another application. We don't know what it means.
Unless they can get something defined. I mean, I don't know, that's up to you guys, you're the P and Z Commission.
Maybe this doesn't have to be done by preliminary plat, but we could put in as
See
some
the list.
that we'd like, prior to final plat approval, the Planning and Zoning Commission will either require a new CUP or approve a list of possible,
Prior to final plat.
yes.
We'll submit more specific list of approved uses
Or will require a new CUP.
for lot 2. So we have to imagine that we're, have a building permit sitting in front of us and determining whether it was an approved use. Something more directional for staff.
Mhm.
Well, Chairman, I didn't see much, in my evaluation of it, I didn't see much difference from staff on the compatibility rating. I do agree with Commissioner Childs that is pretty well laid out. That area of our county is obviously in a commercial type zone. I do also appreciate the workforce housing that's being proposed by the applicant as well. Maybe if Cinda could summarize the conditions of approval that we've added this evening. Make sure that we have them all on our list.
We'll provide easement for ditch on lot 4 and lot 1 in cooperation with Lake Irrigation District. Must have an ITD permit for accesses. May or may not pave areas behind the buildings. And then that condition of approval will be changed to state, a lot of staff report. Building permits will be approved. Building permits can be approved prior to recording final plat upon approval by Central District Health, Lake Irrigation District, and Idaho Transportation Department. However, final occupancy will not be approved until after recording of the final plat. There shall be no short-term rentals of the housing. And then prior to final plat, they will submit a more specific list for approvals on Lot 2.
Everything on my list.
And then they're gonna I mean, I don't know if you wanna make a condition, well, no, there already is one about the Army Corps of Engineer letter has to be updated. That one's condition of approval number 4. Instead of wetland delineation must be updated, it should say Army Corps of Engineer letter must be updated. Because there is not a wetland delineation needed, we just need their determination.
Madam Chairman, I would move that the conditional use permit 23-01 Sands 55 subdivision preliminary plat be approved with the conditions of approval and the listed conditions of approval we just discussed. That's it.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any other further discussion?
I do have one thing that I would like to say. I want to compliment the applicant for meeting with the neighbors and working things out with them and providing that opportunity for issue resolution before coming here. Much appreciated.
You took the words right out of my mouth. And for providing the commission such a complete application. Very nice to have all that additional info that was organized so nicely. So thank you very much. Okay, we have a motion and a second, so we'll move on to a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. There is a 10-day appeal period in which anyone can appeal the decision of the commission to the Board of Valley County Commissioners in accordance with Title 9-5H-12 of the Valley County Code.
Thank you, commissioners, for your time.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
And just for your information, in our ordinance changes that are being proposed in April, one of them is requirement of a neighborhood meeting.
Nice.
I like it.
Okay, let's move on to our fourth new business, CUP 23-02 McCall Landing subdivision. This is a preliminary plat. At this time, I will open the public hearing. Has there been any ex parte contact, or does anyone have a conflict of interest?
No.
For the record, that my son owns a piece of agricultural land on the west side that adjoins his property, but I have no financial interest in it or anything, but he does own it.
That's this piece here.
Do any of the commissioners feel that Commissioner Swain has a conflict of interest for the applicant?
No.
Okay,
Okay, so
we'll move on to the staff report.
this is the piece of property right up here.
Do I have one?
Okay. And this is the plat that's being proposed on it. So CUP 23-02 McCall Landing subdivision preliminary plat. The applicant's McCall Landing LLC. The parcel is located in the north half of Section 33, Township 18 North, Range 3 East of the Boise Meridian, Valley County, Idaho. And it includes the 2 parcels I showed and then part of the Oster subdivision Lot 2. Jeremy Sands is requesting a conditional use permit for a single-family residential subdivision. The plat includes 19 residential lots and 6.4 acres of open space on 64.6 acres. Proposed lot sizes range from 2.2 acres to 4.6 acres. Individual septic systems and individual wells would be used. Existing wetlands, a pond and mud creek are on the property. The wetlands have been delineated. The majority of the pond area would be designated as open space for the subdivision residents. The pond would also be used as a fire protection water source. The applicant will work with Lake Irrigation District regarding the existing irrigation easements and water rights. The lots would be accessed from new gravel private roads onto a single access point at State Highway 55. Areas marked as future development would require a new conditional use permit for further subdividing or commercial use. The applicant has entered into a purchase agreement with Ned Crossley for purchase of a triangle-shaped part of Oster Subdivision Number 2. This property would be used for access to Highway 55. This access location would line up with the new access road across Highway 55, the existing access easements through parcel RP 18N03 East, Section 331207 to Highway 55 would be abandoned. The application was submitted on January 31st, 2023. Legal notice was posted in the Star News on February 16th and February 23rd. Potentially affected agencies were notified on February 6th. Property owners within 300 feet of the property line were notified by fax sheet sent February 7th. The notice and application were posted on the Valley County website on February 6th, and the site was posted on February 28th. Agency comments received. Central District Health stated application and test holes have been completed, waiting on groundwater monitoring, engineering, and specific use of proposed commercial lots before approval can be given. Garrett DeYoung, McCall Fire Chief, stated the applicant may be able to use a dry hydrant with a pond or a 30,000-gallon water storage tank for fire protection. Approval will be required from the fire district prior to installation. Emily Hart, McCall Airport Manager, stated the site is both the approach and horizontal surface in the attached map. The following is recommended. Building permits to include FAA Form 7460-1, navigation easement. An example was attached to her letter. CC&Rs include notification of airport proximity and noise. CC&Rs include recombination of additional soundproofing and existing water features to remain, but enhancements that will attract additional migratory birds be discouraged. Jennifer Schilgen, the airport manager, Idaho Division of Aeronautics, concurs with the recommendations of Emily Hart. Wendy Howell, Idaho Transportation Department Development Services Coordinator, listed requirements. A traffic impact analysis and ITD Form 2109 are required from the applicant. The State Highway 55 corridor is already congested. This project will increase the number of vehicle trips in the corridor. As the county continues to add additional trips to the corridor, the congestion will be worsened until the roadway system is ultimately overloaded and fails. Public comments received. Lisa Muller is opposed. Valley County has 17 subdivisions with a total of 280 building sites approved or in final plat stages. This is not low-income housing. Weed control, landscaping, and lighting is a concern. Development should not receive property tax exemptions. Why does the proposal include future development? County code has not been followed at this site by the property owner. The pond was expanded into a lake. Storage was built to house commercial heavy equipment, and she attached pictures. Physical characteristics of the site: grass-covered rolling topography with wetlands, a pond, and mud creek. Surrounding land use and zoning includes to the north, single-family residential rural parcels, agricultural, Oster subdivision with CUP 12-11 ASAP portables, and a single-family residence, and then CUP 1703 Energy Sill office, shop, and employee housing. To the south is a single-family residential subdivision, Ells Country subdivision, and single-family residential rural parcels. To the east, single-family residential rural parcels, which is Nob Hill Estates, single-family residential rural parcels, CUP 12-10 McCall Donnelly School District Transportation Facility, and then CUP 22-53 Harlow Subdivision, and then the west is rural parcels. Valley County Code in Table 9-3-1 categorizes this use as two residential uses. C, subdivision for single-family subdivisions. Different areas of the Valley County Code were listed here for your review. I know that I had a phone call, and I don't know if they're going to be in attendance, but they were concerned about fencing. So I listed 9-5A-5 here that talks about fencing of the site. There's supposed to be an agreement with the neighbor if there's animals or agricultural use for 30 consecutive days. talks about fire protection, minimum lot sizes, densities, the Wildland Urban Interface Fire Protection Plan. And then staff's compatibility rating was a positive 26. Staff comments or questions. The site is within the McCall Fire District, within Lake Irrigation District, and within a HERD district. All easements must be shown on the final plat, including irrigation easements. An approval letter from Lake Irrigation District is required. Staff recommends the applicant consider making the portion of Oster subdivision along Highway 55 as open space or some sort of entrance sign with landscaping. Additional note on the plat required is surrounding land uses are subject to change, and lots shall not be divided without recordation of a subdivision plat. We'll need a declaration of installation of utilities, including conduit for fiber optics. A private road declaration is required. Wetlands must be shown on the final plat and marked as no build areas or designated building envelopes should be used. We'll need access permit from Idaho Transportation Department. Conduit for fiber optics is required. Draft CC&Rs were not submitted with the application. Are the areas marked future development within this subdivision, or will they be remnants? If they're within the subdivision, they should be identified with a block or lot number. And what I mean by that is I wasn't sure if this was a property line and this was not going to be in the subdivision, or if this was going to be in the subdivision, so I want clarification. Because if this is in the subdivision, it needs an identifier on it. Have you considered a shared driveway to lots 16, 17, and 18? And that's right here. That might be less impact than building this short cul-de-sac here. Just a consideration. Is any landscaping proposed along the western portion of the future development? Recommend you complete the Wildland Urban Interface Fire Protection Plan worksheet. Proposed conditions of approval, 1 through 4 are typical. 5, prior to recordation of the plat, the final plat shall be recorded within 2 years of this permit will be null and void. And then prior to recordation of the plat, the developer's engineer shall certify that the roads are constructed in accordance with the plans approved by the Valley County engineer. If the commission determines that there was not existing access to this parcel. A private road declaration is required prior to recordation and must be noted on the face of the plat. If adjacent properties will be allowed to use the private road access onto Highway 55, then this should be noted on the private road declaration. A declaration of installation of utilities shall be recorded, noted on the face of the plat. Conduit for fiber optics is required. A letter of approval is required from the McCall Fire District prior to recording the final plat. An approval letter from Lake Irrigation District is required. All easements shall be shown on the final plat, including irrigation easements. The wetlands must be delineated and shall be marked as no build areas on the final plat or building envelopes identified outside the wetland areas. CC&R should address exterior lighting, wildfire prevention, noxious weeds, septic system maintenance, wetlands, the open space use, and limit each lot to 1 wood burning device. Shall place addressing numbers at the residences and at the driveway entrance if the house numbers are not visible from the road. Must have a fencing plan with neighboring properties if they run livestock for over 30 days per year. And then our typical notes that have to be put on here. All lighting must comply with lighting ordinance. Only 1 wood burning device. Surrounding land uses are subject to change, and then lots shall not be divided without recordation of a subdivision plat. Since the staff report was completed, we've received additional correspondence. One is from the Lake Irrigation District. They have district water assigned to the parcel. There's a delivery ditch on the west side of the creek. There's an easement right of way. They want their 15 feet of access. They talk about an irrigation easement. Water runoff from any pavement cannot enter into an irrigation facility or ditch by law. When land is divided, the developer must designate how they wish to be split per Idaho code, and then present it to the district board for approval. And then the Lake Irrigation District Board highly recommends that the developer take this into consideration to provide a way for landowners to use the designated irrigation water. I know that in the local land use planning act, that's also a recommendation that instead of using groundwater for irrigation, that they use this allocated surface water. And so they're gonna need to work with Lake Irrigation District on that. And then Exhibit 2, concerning the McCall Airport recommendations were just some emails between Greg Tankersley and myself. And he states, and I think I'll let the applicant address this, that the distance between the highest point on a structure would be 35 feet to the horizontal approach zone. There'd be like a 100-foot difference. And my response was the Planning and Zoning Commission will determine if they believe there should be an navigation easement and whether it's going to be a condition of approval. And I can discuss that more if you would like me to. And then an ITD comment letter follow-up is Exhibit 3. I'll let the applicant address this because they had meetings in December with ITD and came to some agreements, and then we received the letter that said that they need to do a bunch of stuff, and so I'll let them present that. Exhibit 4 is a letter we received today from Brooks Spellman. He's the other gentleman located here. And he bought his property, this guy here. He bought property for agricultural and livestock. Someday they want to be part of the McCall community. And they're concerned about future owners being upset if they have livestock on their property. And they suggest that there be a 6-foot plus wall built with blocks. That ends my staff report.
Questions?
Yep, questions for staff?
On your staff report, page 4, under roads and driveways, the ordinance reads that residential developments, let me get this correct. Residential developments shall have 2 access roads to public streets wherever practical. Why isn't this practical that he has that land in front, that he doesn't have another access point? on Highway 55.
My response would be that Highway 55 is a limited access highway. And he is proposing to put in this one access point that is going to be shared by him and Hogan Dyke. Directly across from the Harlow entrance that we approved in Harlow subdivision. I don't know if you were here, Mr. Swain.
No.
They're going to consolidate these, and then this driveway is going to be directly across from it. But Highway 55 is a limited access highway, and it's 19 lots.
Okay, so that is the reason why he doesn't have 2 access points.
That's my response. You can ask him yourself, though.
And secondly, in that same section, you state that an access permit for an Idaho transportation may be required. But when I read the letter from Idaho Department of Transportation, they don't say may, they say the applicant needs to provide a traffic impact report.
I'm going to let them address that because they had 2 different meetings. One was in December where they agreed to something, and then we received the next letter, which was more of a form letter. I'm going to let the applicant address that.
All right.
The bottom line is that they have to have a permit from ITD. That's our bottom line.
Those are my questions.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, now we will move forward with the presentation by the applicant. Please state your name and address for the record.
It's a hard bench.
My name is Jeremy Sands, my wife Stacy, and we reside at 190 Cron Lane in McCall, Idaho, 83638. Also here this evening, Steve Milliman representing us with legal counsel, and Rob Pear from Crestline Engineering as well. And we'll get into it. It's the end of a long day, so I'll try to move quickly. This is a low-density, single-family residential subdivision, 19 single-family residential lots, as Cinda stated, ranging from 2.2 to 4.6 acres. We do have 6.4 acres of open space, mostly the pond and the surrounding wetlands area. Let's see. Subdivision, I'd like to note, is well separated from Highway 55. At the closest, we have lot 16 is approximately 345 feet from Highway 55. Lot 1 is well over 400 feet from the highway, and lot 19 is nearly 600 feet from the highway. As for the future development parcel, we have no current plans. So that is truly future. My wife and I have discussed waiting for the highway to be widened, whether that's 5 years, 10 years. We have no intention of funding modifications of Highway 55 for whatever we choose to do there. So our plan now is to hold on to that property for well into the future. And we do understand that any use of that future development would require us coming before you with a additional or separate CUP. So the location that we have selected is preferred by ITD. They did want it to line up with the Harlow's entrance and other possible development. I preferred another entrance. Commissioner Swain, you asked about a second entrance. That was my desire. I actually wanted to have two entrances to this subdivision and the future development. ITD, and I can let Crestline speak more on the actual requirements for Highway 55 and how far driveways have to be from each other. And so it was, I want to say impossible to meet all of their criteria to have two entrances for the subdivision. And their objective right now is to minimize driveways. So we did everything we could to assist with that and minimize driveways, not add additional. So let's see. As for the pond, I know there was some comments from neighbors. Prior to any work on the pond, there was a survey company that came in and did a topo and surveyed all of the 80 acres. And in that survey, they defined the boundaries of the pond, and they were flagged and marked. The pond, we mucked out the pond due to the levee had broke in previous years. And so the pond there was about a foot of water on top of 3 to 4 feet of silt and muck. So we basically mucked out the pond and put the material into haul trucks and put it onto the, I don't know, what will be lots, I guess. So we'll figure out what to do with that dirt when it comes time. Let's see. Let's see, worked within boundaries. As for fencing, I know neighbors brought up fencing, and Cinda asked me to address this. There is an existing fence. Years ago, this property was used for grazing. There is a fence along the entire perimeter of the 80 acres, including along the highway. Previous renters that were in the house prior to us buying the land, their kids apparently had cut through a portion of the fence to drive their side-by-sides and access Norwood. So it is our intention to repair the damage that was done. So the fence will be repaired this summer. So it will have a fence, a working fence around the entire perimeter. On to staff questions and comments. Cinda asked about whether we intend to include future development parcel as a lot in the subdivision or not. We had not intended to include it in the subdivision. But as we proceed to final plat, we'll evaluate that. Shared driveway. Cinda suggested we consider using a shared driveway and flag lots for 16, 17, and 18. We will also look to that as an option as we move forward to final platting. Comments from ITD. Yeah, this caught us by surprise. It does seem like a standard letter that they are issuing. We did meet with ITD, and it was a very productive meeting. And in that meeting, they very clearly stated that a traffic study would not be required for the 19 home lots. So we are proceeding under that. And we do understand that a permit from IDT will be required. Comments from airport manager. We appreciate their request to advise purchasers that even though we are 3 miles from the airport, I actually believe it's 1.5 miles from the airport, we are underneath the airport approach surface. There may be impacts from that. In fact, we are happy to include that in our CCNRs. It is important to recognize that the airport approach surface is approximately 200 feet above the property. I believe it's 135 or 135. Okay, sorry, we had 200, but we did get confirmation that it's 135 feet above. So building code would state nothing how taller than 35 feet. So that approach surface is 100 feet above anything that could be constructed. There's obviously absolutely no risk that anything we do will impact planes approaching or taking off from the airport. We are not in agreement with the navigation easement. We are not in agreement that an navigation easement is required or appropriate for this property. And then I will defer to Steve Milliman to discuss that further, or if you have any questions about that. Conditions of approval. We have reviewed the proposed conditions of approval and have no objections to any of them. And in conclusion, I think we've met all the requirements of county ordinances. We meet the specific requirements of the ordinance, and I think any reasonable evaluation of the compatibility matrix results in a positive score. We will not place any unreasonable burden on the public infrastructure. So I hope you will agree that we have earned your approval. Happy to answer any questions you might have for me or Steve or Rob.
Thank you. Go ahead with any questions for the applicant.
As
Okay.
usual. In Lisa's Moeller letter dated February 24th, she said you took a pond and made it into a lake, and you've admitted that you've expanded an existing pond. Do you know, were there any permits required, and did you get those permits to do that?
Well, the pond was not expanded at all. The exact boundary that was defined by the surveyor.
The original?
The original.
size original was, you just dug it deeper?
Exactly. We just mucked out the pond. The pond was not expanded at all.
And you talked about fencing. You have residential, commercial, and agricultural. Are those going to be different fences, or do you have a design of what type of fence?
The fencing is already existing.
I'm sorry?
The fence is already there. There is currently a fence around the
So you're
entire.
just going to repair it's 3-wire fence? I don't know what it is.
Yeah, barbed wire.
Barbed wire, so you'll just repair that fence?
Correct.
Is that what you're planning on doing? Okay.
Correct.
I don't know if you're prepared tonight, but in the staff report, page 8, comment number 14 regarding your decision to provide landscaping along the western portion of the development. Number 14, is any landscaping proposed along the western portion of the
Is
future
any,
development?
no, that's future development and there's no landscaping proposed.
Okay. And are you proposed anything different with the agricultural land in fencing to separate residential from livestock? Or is it going to be the same fence all the way
The
around?
existing barbed wire fence, yes.
All right. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, Commissioner Swain prompted me to ask another question. The fencing, are you opposed to putting the fencing agreement into the CC&Rs? Because the fence is maintained when the subdivision is built and approved, that maintenance and upkeep, you're responsible for half of the fences that border your neighbors. Are you opposed to putting that in the CC&Rs? Is each lot owner going to be responsible for that, or would there be a HOA that's responsible for maintaining those into the future or into perpetuity?
Thank you, Commissioner Roberts. I'm not opposed to, we will have an HOA, and I'm not opposed to evaluating that and possibly having the individual landowners be responsible through CC&Rs that they maintain. They would be obligated to, I mean, it's a barbed wire fence, so it's not like it would be a large expense to maintain that.
It's been a common practice of certain developments that subdivide and they forget about the adjacent use of land.
Sure.
And being an agricultural area, and with the neighbor actually putting it in writing that they plan on running cattle there, that's something that has to be maintained in perpetuity.
Okay.
I think it's required by law.
Okay. Understood.
It is.
Thank you.
And this is in a HERD district, correct? So it's a fence out.
If it is in the district.
I think it says it is.
It's in a herd district,
It is, okay.
so it's up to the property owners to keep their cattle in. Which does not nullify the requirement
No.
of a CUP to provide the fence between a residential and agricultural use.
Most of them maintain it.
And Cindy, I'd like to correct something that Commissioner Roberts said. When it's two adjoining agricultural land, they take 50% liability. But in this one, it says, the permittee shall cause a fence to be constructed so as to permit animals from entering the area, and the permittee shall provide the maintenance. So he's entitled to do the entire fence, the maintenance.
Yeah.
The applicant, they say the permittee, but
Where is that? Where'd you find that?
9585.
Okay, thank you.
It's on page 4 of 9 of the staff report. It says the permittee shall provide for the maintenance of said fence through covenants, association documents, agreements with adjoining owners, or other form acceptable to the commission prior to approval of the permit, so there is reasonable assurance that the fence will be maintained in functional condition so long as the conflicting uses continue.
Thank you.
So my condition was cooperation with repair and maintenance will be in CC&Rs. Be done by either, to be done by HOA.
Done in accordance to the 9-5A-5. Right.
Right, but that number might change, so I'll write that out. Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay. At this time, we'll go ahead and take testimony from the public then.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Just as a reminder, testimony is limited to 3 minutes. So at this time, we'll start with testimony of proponents. Is there any testimony of the uncommitted? Okay. Go ahead and step up and please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Joe Zimmer, and my address is 37 Johnson Lane. My husband, Barry Mathias, and I own property that adjoins this piece to its north.
That one?
It's hard for me to tell from here, but it would be directly to the north of lots 10, 11, part of the open space.
If that's it.
And we do have cattle there. So that is a primary area of concern for me because we have to maintain that fence, as you know, to keep cows in. And our existing fence line is 1 foot inside of our surveyed property line. So the fence that's there now is a 5-wire smooth electric fence. And we maintain it because we have to know it's functional. And the rest of the fence on the north side of this property is falling down. It was barbed wire 10 or 20 years ago when people ran cattle in there, but it's wouldn't hold anything in now. So we don't want barbed wire on our fence line. We're maintaining our own fence. And if the applicant wants to construct fence to address the somewhat conflicting uses of agricultural and residential, it would have to be a foot south of our existing fence line because, as I said, that line is inside our property line. My concern is that with lots this small, a 2-acre lot that has to have a house, a septic field, and a well on it, that abuts agricultural property is kind of inviting dissent between neighbors. The cows love that area there, just north of this fence line. It's warm in the spring, it's sunny, it's dry, but there's live water on it. There will be cows directly on the other side of the fence for lots 10 and 11, and I'm not sure how to address that. I mean, maybe the commission has ideas that they've used in the past about agricultural and residential use adjoining each other like this. But that's the primary source of my concern. We own our existing fence, we maintain it, but just for that little area that's ours. My other concern was that I didn't hear any report from the Valley County Soil and Water Conservation District. I don't know if they're required to make a report, but this area is in the Mud Creek drainage, and that's a drainage that has in the past been so important to them that they've actually subsidized improvements of irrigation systems in order to keep the water clean running through there. So you may wish to consult them and get a report from them prior to issuing your final plat approval. Wow.
Thank you very much. Next, please state your name and address for the record.
I'm Emily Hart, McCall Airport Manager. Address is 336 Steinhard Lane, Hangar 100 in McCall. I'm glad, Cindy, that you brought up Greg Tankersley's comments to you, and I also appreciate your comments about the realities of how high the planes are going to be over this development. I understand the risk is actually quite low here. It is in the approach. For your education, what you can reasonably expect, and it will depend on departure or arrival, planes between 800 and 1,500 feet off deck. In the summer when it's hot and they're taking off heavy for the backcountry, they could be considerably lower. My main goal in being here tonight, and with every comment I submit, is to manage community expectations and enhance situational awareness. I'm wondering if it would be possible to add to the application checklist an additional box that would say, is this development within 3 miles of the airport? You may want to choose to include Donley and Cascade in that down the road. If the answer is yes, then this form may be required, this form will be required. Aviation easements are not always appropriate for this location. I do not believe they necessarily are, but I'd like to throw it out there to have these kinds of discussions. Other developments that have recently been approved, they were definitely appropriate. 360 Ranch, for example, in the intercritical zone. So tonight I respectfully ask that you consider the comments I submitted. This site, as my little map shows, I am not a graphic designer, it's not to scale. It's about 2/3 in the approach and 1/3 in the horizontal. I've given you the altitude of the likely planes that are flying over. I guarantee that I will get calls about this plane is flying over my house and there's fumes and it's too loud. And I thought it'd be quiet and nice here in the country. So part of my reasons for being here is selfish because I have a pretty fat noise and fumes file. So I just, like I said, want to manage community expectations. And let's see if I missed anything. Oh, I would also like to ask, I did review the curved horn final plat. Reserve at McCall Ranch, I think is the new name. And the proximity to the airport map was included, but it was really fuzzy and you could barely read it. And it didn't say anything about flight paths or noise, fumes, that kind of stuff. So if we don't want to do aviation easements and that type of thing, I just think a little more information in the proximity to the airport notification that may be included with your COAs, that would be appreciated by the airport community. And I will stand for questions.
Any questions? Okay.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for your input. Any other testimony of the uncommitted? Yes, sir. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Barry Mathias. I live at 37 Johnson Lane, and you've heard my wife here, Joe, just a minute ago. One thing I'd like to bring up about that fence that we have there is that it's on our property. We do maintain it, but this is a fence outstate. We have cattle, and occasionally they'll get out, and I'm concerned about, I just want to let Jeremy know that, you know, if they want to protect the property owners back there, they probably need their own fence. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other uncommitted testimony? Okay. Testimony of opponents? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Dennis Musgrove. I live at 36 Garden Lane. And my concerns is I had my well, I had to put a new pump in all spring before last. The difference between with just the development that's went on there since, the difference between my rust line on the pipe going down to my submersible pump and the wet line was already a foot. So the water level has already dropped a foot. So what is all this development going to do to the water table? And are we going to wind up having to drill our wells deeper? And that's one of my major concerns. The other one is what is all the sewer going to do to my water?
You know, I've had my water tested before I ever bought this place and moved into it, and it was good. And is it going to maintain that level of quality, or is this going to affect it? And it's my general reasons. My other reasons for opposing it is strictly selfish. Is I just built my son a house that is 40 feet off of his property line with $20,000 worth of windows facing north. And what's he going to see now? He's either going to see somebody's backyard or he's going to see somebody's 6-foot wooden fence or what, you know? You know, there's enough development going on. I have no idea. I don't think this development is needed for housing. It's going to wind up being seasonal people, because if you're just middle class, you can't afford to build a house in Valley County anymore. I couldn't afford to been here if I hadn't bought at the bottom of the housing market. So the traffic, you ever try to get out on 55 in the summertime and have to cross, you know, to go north off of Garden Lane? It's next to impossible. You have to go down to Norwood and go the back way. What's that going to do to traffic on Garden Lane? It's already dusty as heck in the summertime. We got graded one time the whole summer. The dust has been outrageous the past few years. So, you know, people, when I bought here, I've been here since 1986, but I bought this house 11 years ago because it was out in the country. I'd like to stay out in the country. That's my selfish reasons. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question for you. How deep is your well?
I'm going to say it's about 70 feet. I didn't actually measure it whenever I had to buy this $600 pump. But when he pulled the pipe out, I noticed my rust line and where my wet line was, and that was in the springtime, so it wasn't in the dry part of the year, which shouldn't affect water table anyway. I don't know for fact, but I have heard from neighbors that 2 of them have already had to deepen their wells.
And that 70 feet is the rust line?
No,
Or is
the
that
rust
the
line,
overall depth?
I didn't measure where the rust line was, but the wet line from the rust line, you can tell where the water level used to be and where the water level is by the wet line when he pulled all that pipe out of my.
Yeah. Thank you.
So that
Appreciate
is a major concern to me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other opponents that would like to testify? Okay, thank you. At this time, we will allow rebuttal by the applicant. Mr. Milliman, please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Steve Milliman, 706 North First Street, McCall, representing the applicant. I just have a couple of comments. Appreciate the public testimony. As to Joe Zimmer's comments, I think it'd be appropriate for us to include in the CCNR's a very clear disclosure and admonition that there is livestock activity on adjoining properties, and that may have impacts, but that those are pre-existing activities that the owners have a right to perpetuate, so that there's no question that any purchasers in this subdivision are aware that they adjoin ongoing livestock activities. And as far as the fence, it's very helpful to hear about their fence. I think I'm clear from the earlier conversation that the applicant's going to be required to maintain a fence on the applicant's property, which I think is appropriate and also partially addresses Barry Mathias's comment that there needs to be a fence there just to make sure that livestock doesn't come through onto the subdivision. I really appreciate Emily Hart being here. I haven't met Emily before, but Emily, nice to meet you. I don't think a navigation easement is appropriate on this property. There is no risk of interference. My concern about the navigation easement is it really turns control over to the city of McCall, and with some very, very vague language. But what I hear from Emily is she acknowledges that they're not appropriate for all properties. This is a very low-risk property. What I do think is appropriate in her recommendations is that we include in the CCNRs clear admonitions about the information she has provided, about the airport approach surface, about the separation from it, about the fact there will be planes taking off and landing, that there will be noise associated with that, and that the owners understand that when they purchase lots. And I would be happy to review those provisions with Emily before we present them with the final plat and get her input on them. And I think that's an appropriate way to address this level of risk. This is a very low level of risk. And with the county height ordinance and the county lighting ordinance, there should be absolutely no impacts. But I do agree it's very important to acknowledge, to make sure purchasers understand they are going to hear planes coming and going. And it hopefully protects Emily from getting calls and gives her something to refer to if she needs to. I sympathize with Mr. Musgrave's desire to have the property stay where it is. I would say it's important to recognize this is a low-density application. And you could, under your ordinance, put twice the number of lots on this property. And I don't think it would be a good land plan, and I wouldn't be standing here if that were the land plan. I think this is a good land plan. These are reasonably sized lots. That partially helps diffuse some of Mr. Musgrave's concerns. I think the intention, and Jeremy can correct me if I'm wrong, is that the wells will be used only for potable water. The irrigation, the water will be provided from the existing surface water rights. So that considerably reduces the amount of water that will be used by owners of homes in this subdivision. They will not be watering extensive grounds, and we will make sure in the CCRs that that is clear. Obviously, wells are always a concern. There is data from Idaho Water Resources and that has been monitoring wells in Valley County and has actually thus far concluded from that monitoring that we are not getting a significant drawdown effect from residential domestic wells. So that's encouraging. But again, the fact that this is as low a density as it is and only used for potable purposes, I think is a mitigating factor on that. I'd be happy to address any questions you might have on the navigation easement side, but I do think we can address Emily's concerns with CCNRs and not an easement that cedes control over the property to another jurisdiction.
Question. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Counselor, on the fencing issue, since it's dominated a lot of discussion this evening, 9-5A-5 does require as Commissioner Swain pointed out, that the applicant provide the fencing and maintenance of said fencing. So that will be something that we'll need to address either through an HOA, initial construction. And while I'm on that topic, one of the interactions between agricultural operations and this urban development is trespass of dogs, chasing cattle. We've brought this up as issues on other subdivisions recently. I think there needs to be a very clear understanding that dogs chasing cows can be shot by the owner of the cattle. But maybe working with the adjacent landowners to determine what type of fencing might be required to prevent the dogs from actually getting through the fence would be very appreciated, which is simply a type of material that's used instead of straight barbed wire.
Yeah, Commissioner Roberts, I really appreciate that comment. To this day, one of the favorite CCNR provisions I've ever drafted was for Caitlin's dad, and it provided not a restriction on dogs, but a clear admonition that if your dog comes out of the subdivision onto my property, I'm going to shoot it. And I didn't exactly say that, but it was the message that you're delivering, which is you need to be responsible for
I'm
your
trying
animals.
to water that down. You should be more politically correct.
I don't know. I kind of liked it. No, I think that's a very appropriate issue to address in the CCNRs and also to look at with the fencing. And I think we're clear on the fencing requirements as far as the owner's responsibility. I'm going to recommend to Jeremy that those, at the point of the transfer of control of the subdivision, those be assigned to the association. I think it's much more appropriate for the association to have the responsibility and the control over all of the fencing rather than a bunch of individual owners. And they can assess for that and deal with it appropriately. So that's what I think we'll do.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Mr. Middleman, is the applicant aware that some of these fences are not on property line? That surround his property? Is the applicant aware of that?
I don't know, Commissioner Swain. You apparently have some knowledge about it, though. They're very typical that fences are on and off. So I guess that's one of the first tasks the applicant's going to have to undertake is to work with neighbors to be clear about where this barbed wire fence is. And if it is on somebody else's property, then
Has he surveyed the property yet?
It is my understanding that our fence, the barbed wire fence.
Sorry, but you'll actually need to come up and speak into the microphone.
Yeah, all that'll be pinned. The subdivisions will have pins.
It is my understanding that the barbed wire fence that surrounds this 80-acre parcel is on our property, and that there are additional fences by other property owners that are on their property as secondary fences. But the primary fence around this 80 acres, it was placed there by the previous, multiple previous homeowners going back 20, 25, 30 years when cattle used to graze on this 80-acre parcel, that fence was built and constructed by the owner of this 80-acre parcel on this land, not neighboring parcels.
that being said, Cinda's point is a good one. This property has to be surveyed and pinned in order to do the subdivision. So to the extent that there is any deviation on those fences, we're going to find out about it. And wouldn't be unusual in Valley County if there is. And if there is, then obviously Jeremy's going to have to work with the adjoining property owners. But I think our takeaway that's clear is that he has responsibility for having a perimeter fence and maintaining it. And composition is a open question.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. We will now close the public hearing for deliberations by the commission.
Continue the discussion of fencing. I'm sure that they will survey this property and know that they're on property line. But I have a little concern. I don't really have it in the agricultural land, but when you get to kind of the south, there's quite a few homes there. And these homes on 2 to 4 acres are most likely going to have children, and children and barbed wire don't really go together real well. I'd make a suggestion that in the repairing of this fence, it would solve two problems: the danger to children and prevent dog livestock interaction. That's some 30 inches, 36 inch of wire mesh fencing be put up, and then on top of that, perhaps smooth wire rather than barbed wire as a fence that we should choose for this development in the location that it is, and the fact that there's a lot of residential lots. I'm just kind of worried about those two items. And then, as the fence is done, I mean, the other owners could choose to do additional fencing or other items to keep their livestock away from this residence. I think this developer will have done enough. And if they don't appreciate that, then they could do some other alternative fencing and a separation. Those are my comments regarding fencing.
Any other thoughts, comments on the application?
Madam Chairman, I think there's I mean, we have to follow the ordinances of our county, and right now our county ordinances allow multiple use within the entire county for all kinds of uses. Compatibility rating that Cinda did is appropriate for this. I think that this whole corridor between Lake Fork and McCall is developing. There are some residential areas, but a lot of it's commercial. So it's a mixed use county. That's what we have. And I think as the county grows, we'll continue to have these discussions, and maybe the ordinances will change, maybe they won't. But at this point in time, I think the application is within the standards. I do, Cinda, if this is moved forward this evening, we've talked a lot about fences. You've added that, I assume, as a condition.
Yeah, we'll repair and maintain a fence in the CCNRs in accordance with, and then I'll take some words out of the ordinance.
Okay. And then about the note to purchasers about within the airport concern.
They said on the record that they're gonna put it in their CCNRs.
Okay.
And they're gonna work with Emily to do that.
And then maybe the good counselor would provide the good dog trespass language that he
Right.
referred to
CCNRs, yeah.
earlier.
I'm sorry, the public hearing's closed, so we can't hear from the public.
Because I had a question that came up. I don't know if Mr. Sands.
I'm sorry.
It was after you closed comment.
There was one more thing that we wanted to add about just agricultural uses being adjacent and making sure that people were aware of that. But I think that was the only other condition
All right.
to add.
Most people don't complain if it's ag, it's when it's changed to residential that they'll start complaining. That's why we now put that note by ordinance and their surrounding land uses are subject to change on plats.
Is it appropriate to do no short-term rentals? Can we do that? In the CCNRs?
We can't
No,
do it, but
no.
we can ask if the applicant is willing to put it in their
That's right.
CCNRs.
No, you can't require it.
Okay. And then, one final
You can
question.
recommend it, but you can't require it.
Yeah. Do they not have to do a road development agreement because they come off of 55?
And then, I did present to Valley Soil Water Conservation District this application at a meeting. They're aware of this application, and we did not receive any comments on this one. And I'll say for the record that when the applicant cleaned this pond, he had the proper permits. And I went into a map series called Way Back, where you can go back years and years, and he did not exceed the boundaries in, for this pond, 30, 40 years ago.
I'd have to say I agree with Ken. I think this is an appropriate land use application. They've done a really good job. I appreciate also that it's lower density than it could be. It could be significantly higher. So, Madam Chair, I would motion to approve CUP 23-02 McCall Landing subdivision preliminary plat with the stated conditions of approval, changing number 16 to HOA maintenance of the fencing appropriate to keep livestock and dogs separated. Add the verbiage from the airport, not requiring an avigation easement, but adding the appropriate appropriate statements that Emily provided. Adding verbiage about trespassing of dogs to the CCNRs, and adding agricultural uses and livestock activity as as possible adjoining uses.
Second the motion.
The motion and a second to approve CUP 23-02. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries.
Thanks.
There is a 10-day appeal period in which anyone can appeal the decision of the commissioners to the Board of County Commissioners in accordance with Title 9-5H-12 of the Valley County Code. Thanks, everyone, and have a great evening. Yep, one more got added.
Okay, the next one is Huckleberry Ridge. Want me to take off on this one? You hear me? Yep. We're still in a meeting.
Could everyone please exit the room? We're still in a meeting. Thank you. Thank you. Sure, staff, take it away on CUP 21-43.
Oh, okay, so if you look up here, when he came in for his preliminary plat, it's these two parcels here, this, see you, Rob? This, 20 acres and this 20 acres at Sal Galucci, and he platted this. At the time, we recommended that he put a road to the adjoining property, and he said he really didn't want to. Well, now he wants to. Wants to
Is
put a
this
road.
on West Mountain Road,
Yeah, it's.
one we had about a year ago?
In 21.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Okay, so he wants to continue the road through now, and he wants to also include one more lot. And I mean, I said, I think it still would comply. I mean, you're adding one lot. That's not anything big. I mean, Valley County Code 10-3-3-1A, when you're reviewing a final plat compared to a preliminary plat, says, is it substantially the same? Well, is an additional lot substantially the same?
Listening closely.
I would think so. What?
This might apply to a lot of people. If it's substantially the same.
Well, I'm not getting it.
Well,
Is it substantially the same?
How many
how
lots
many
are there?
times do you do that? I don't know.
Well, that's why I'm asking you.
Yeah.
His original plat,
Is this the one we have? Is this the original, the 9 lot?
The one I
This is-
attached is this
Oh.
original.
Is the original. So he's asking for a 10th lot further to the west.
yes, he wants another lot to the west because the Solons that own this piece, Marge and Helen, finally realized that they don't really have access. And so he's gonna give them access through if he can plat another piece here for himself.
Nice.
And he'll build the road.
So he's going to continue the road all the way up through to the Solon's property and give them access.
Yes.
And he owns all of the property?
He owns these two pieces right here.
And where's he want to build?
He's going to build the road, he's gonna continue it through like this, up to here. And the extra lot will be in here.
But is that
He said it'll be about 10-acre lot.
Is that the property he owns?
No, he owns these.
He's kind of
two
doing a
pieces.
trade for
Yeah, Solon
access
owns the
to
property, but he
the,
wants
to another lot.
So it'll be a subdivision.
Who owns
right?
north of Solon's property?
Right, yep.
Well, that's
It would be a
Wade
subdivision.
Bushman and this is Solon Livestock. So Solon owns it. He's going to provide a road to this 160 here. I think it's 160. That's what he kept saying to me.
160.
And then, because they don't really have access.
So if we said it was a substantial change, you would have to bring in an entirely new CUP?
Yeah. And it just seemed like,
But it's a subdivision, isn't it? I mean, on the Solon property, isn't that a subdivision? Gonna have a new parcel.
Well, I guess I'm totally missing what you're asking.
So that
Because it's a
doesn't,
subdivision of the
so that'll be a
Sullivan.
different deal, Ken.
Oh, well, it's just one lot that he's going to include in his subdivision. It's like a 10-acre lot that he's going to
So the
include.
Sullins don't have to go through a process
No,
to separate
the
that.
Solons aren't platting their property over in here. It's just one additional lot right here.
But if you take that off, doesn't that become a subdivision? Because they're subdividing that corner off of there,
To sell it to him.
right?
Doesn't that
trade.
become two houses on one parcel?
No. Then what you'll have is you'll have a 10-lot subdivision that includes a piece here. So your plat will look like,
I think we understand that part. I think what we're asking is this because the Sullins are taking 10 acres of a whole parcel and cutting it down to a small piece so that he can trade for road access, is that considered a subdivision process that we need to go through?
but
Is that what
see,
you're asking?
the subdivision process isn't completed until you record the plat.
We're talking on the Solon side.
Property.
That's a
The
different piece
Solons-
of property.
There's got to be an exchange of property somewhere along the line.
Well, the Sullins are gonna keep their 150 and give him 10 acres that he's gonna put inside his plat.
They're
In that
subdividing
process.
10 acres off of the 160. Right?
Technically.
But the plat will make that legal. He's going to plat it in this subdivision. They're not gonna just split off 10
You're
acres.
saying you can do it through one process even though it's two owners and three different parcels?
Yes.
Okay.
Whoever owns the property has to sign the plat. So he's gonna include this 10 acres, which will keep theirs a legal parcel.
So I kind of think in numbers. Will be 10 lots, that's essentially 10% of the subdivision. What if someone comes in with a 100-lot subdivision? Well, I want to add 10. Because that's only 10% and you guys did it for Sal.
But that's when you're gonna decide if it's a substantial change. Is one lot a substantial change?
Right.
I think
Percentage
the-
wise, I almost think it
A
is.
bigger question to me, I think, is probably the road. And if this is given access to that property and that property is eventually developed, I think the road to me is a bigger issue than just adding one lot. And, what they're allowed to, future uses and working with the road department, and maybe that would all still happen anyways.
Well, that would happen at the time that you platted that.
So that would still occur regardless.
The definition of substantial is of considerable importance, size, or worth.
If I could double my IRA by 10%, I would.
Substantial.
Double it by 10%.
I wish I had one.
Well, but he also, at this point, doesn't have a road development agreement, right?
No, he'll work on one. So that 11th lot will be included in his subdivision.
Does
Or the 10th lot.
Does his subdivision currently have to do a road development agreement?
Yeah, because it goes right onto West Mountain Road.
Right, I wasn't sure if in 21 we were
Oh, right.
requiring them.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. Was he required to do
I don't recall, but
No, I
he'll
don't think
he'll have to do it now.
Oh.
That's what I'm saying, that if we allow
No,
this.
actually-
okay, well, then you have to still do
Actually, I
road
recall
development.
Jeff McFadden said there weren't significant enough impacts for him to have to do anything.
Would that change though I would want that to be looked at with this.
Okay.
Just because it's going to access another 150 acres.
And I think in 21 and 22, we were viewing road development agreements differently.
Right. We didn't start the, we call them CID. CIPs until 6 months ago.
Has he began construction or anything yet?
I don't think so. And he also wanted to include this little piece down here too. Well, because it's worthless to this guy, so it provides better access to the road. I mean, he's doing some land planning, not just, cutting pieces out.
So just
Working
that
with
little
his
triangle?
neighbors. Huh?
Just that little triangle?
Yeah.
Little
triangle was a huge
Just-
hassle.
What?
Do you remember that when we didn't have access to the parcel to the south?
Yeah, there's this little piece here.
Yeah.
Okay, we have deliberated, we talked about it.
I was looking
Way
for a
past
condition.
Ken's 8 PM closing
That's my
time.
bedtime.
It's fine. So is there a motion regarding CUP 21-43 preliminary plat?
Yes, he has to enter into a road development agreement.
I'm not sure this one can die for lack of motion. So someone has to do something.
Well, I would ask you to consider this. If he came back with an entirely new subdivision plat to add one lot, is it gonna change anything?
It
Would
wouldn't
we
change.
still approve it?
Right.
Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
And I like, now that we know that he does have to do a road development agreement and go through that process with the county, I would motion that we, how do you want this motion to go?
That you don't believe addition of one more lot and continuation of the road to the Solon piece of property is a substantial change.
And that we continue to allow the CUP 21-43 to continue on to final plat.
It's just not gonna be the perfect rectangle when you get it.
I'll second that.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to not require CUP 21-43 to apply for a new CUP. Is there any further discussion? I'm gonna say, I understand why it's gonna be easier to do this and how it makes sense. I'm concerned about setting a precedence.
I agree with the chairman.
So what you guys think that when you come in for a preliminary plat, that you can't change anything?
No, that's not what no, that's not what I mean. If
Okay.
it was within his plat that he originally platted, that's one thing. This has property outside of
Okay.
what was in his preliminary plat.
It's grown by 10 plus acres. Guess it's a year and a half later.
Okay, I'll call, or we're, sorry, I'm getting a little rummy. We'll go ahead and vote. We'll go ahead and do this per person. Commissioner Childs?
Aye.
Commissioner Swain? Commissioner, why am I spacing me? Freeman. Ugh.
Aye.
Commissioner Roberts?
No.
I will vote no as well. Motion carries. CUP 21-43 does not require a new CUP. Okay, then we have facts and conclusions. Unless there's any changes, I would entertain a motion.
Make a motion that we approve facts and conclusions for CUP 2254 Haney solar panels, 2255 Jug Mountain Ranch PUD Phase 3, and 2257 Lamone multiple residences, and authorize the chairman to sign.
I'll second. Motion and a second to approve. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. If there's anything else from staff?
Nope.
Okay. Then
We have, I see you sent an email about open meeting webinar.
Oh, yeah, if you guys want, I saw that on Idaho Association of Counties, if you want to sign up for it.
Do we have to sign up through it?
I don't think so, you just go and kind of fill it out and see if they let you in.
Association of County.
The meeting's open? The meeting's open? Okay, is there a motion?
So before we completely adjourn, I cannot be here the 16th. So
Sorry,
I
Tim,
know
what did
you
you
asked
say?
me if
Well,
I
yeah,
could
well, you
be,
had said that, yeah.
but I'm 16th, and then the work session is on the 20th
18th of April.
of April. So we're okay on March.
Yes, we're not having one in March because it was spring break.
But the 16th of April, 16th of March in next week.
Next Thursday.
I will not be here.
Okay,
Flying the friendly skies.
well, you just have at it. Wear your seatbelt.
Yeah, boy, yeah.
Yeah.
Been to Phoenix the other night. Are we off?
Are we done?
No, you're still on the record, you haven't adjourned.
Make a
Move
motion, we adjourn.
I don't think you need the motion, just chairman and
Yeah.
adjourn
And this
it.
meeting is now adjourned at 9:50.
There you go.
What are we at, 9? Okay, just a sec, you're
She
still on
likes
record.
motions.